Here.
Attorney Jeff
Parker.
It's been a while.
Dr. Goldberg.
Great, thanks. I'd like to say a special welcome back to Trustee Williams. It's been a while, and we're excited that she's been able to come back, so we appreciate that.
Happy to be back. It's been a long time, very long time.
That brings us to item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda by Trustee Williams, seconded by Trustee Pennington. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. That brings us to the continuation of the public hearing and adoption of an ordinance approving the amendment to the Superior Town Center Plan Development Zone District Plan zoning in case PD-A-2013-1. Mr. Mackley?
Thank you, Mayor. This is the board's 4th meeting reviewing this item. The last 3 meetings, we've been going through the design guidelines, which is a fairly thick document, and we ended at Appendix D, is where I had us ending. So I'll leave it up to the board if you want me to just pick up there, or...
Yeah, unless the applicant has something that they want to start out with, otherwise we could just go there.
And I just wanted to say that it's good to be back, and I watched all the meetings, and more than once, many times, had all the time in the world to do that. I'm ready to move forward here, and I definitely have a lot to say today. I will do my best to get through it all. I'm sure that there'll be quite a few meetings. I'm going to have to get through them. Obviously, I'm not going to do them all today, but I will try to get to the big picture items first, if that would be helpful to you. But we'll get there when you're ready.
All right, thanks very much.
I look forward to, this is Randy Goodson with RC Superior. Thank you very much for your continued attention and efforts and time considering our application. In response to Trustee Williams' comments, I look forward to your comments whenever you choose when you want to provide them. At the last hearing, we received some direction on both the land use concept, and there was quite a bit of discussion on building heights and massing. And so we scrambled for the last week to provide another version of a plan for you to review and consider, so we can get your feedback, because conceivably after this hearing, we will then be revising all of our all the documents that comprise our application to respond to all the comments that you've made and the copious notes that we've taken, and we'll also be reviewing the hearings as well. But as it relates to design, I'm not sure we'll have a lot more opportunity to go back and forth on design, so I didn't want to miss this opportunity between last week and this week. So whenever you think it's appropriate, I have 2 exhibits that we've produced in an effort to respond.
Great. Do you have anything short that you want in terms of exhibit, in terms of show us, or?
Yeah, I do. I have those two exhibits now. And Matt, if I could continue to borrow your laser pointer.
Oh, yeah.
The first, that's not somehow the screen compressed the exhibit. How to fix that? You recognize the property, hopefully, but the dimensions have been elongated somehow in the transfer. The core area hasn't changed very much at all, and again, the focus on this plan was to revise the south area plan. There were a couple of comments that that required a revision and to get specific feedback. The first guidance was to really make sure that the Coal Creek connection was a strong connection, not just an easement that the road might connect and might or might not go somewhere. And when that road was identified as a priority road and a priority connection that was very, very likely, as I discussed at the last hearing, were that the case, we would change the grading and bring this road into the southern village green. And that there's a couple of components there. There's the bike path and trail component, and then there's the pedestrian promenade, and of course then it's the third, and I probably put them in reverse order, is traffic and the traffic that comes into the town square. And so our goal in making this these restaurants and retail viable is, again, as we've discussed quite a bit, we've brought Marshall Road on, and your own economic advisor, Katie Press, had talked quite a bit about traffic and the accessibility and visibility. So we have Marshall Road coming down, and now with this redesign, we have Coal Creek Road coming in. This here is our southern village green, so we'll have a small little one-way situation. And then the pedestrian promenade starts up here. You can see the road is quite a bit wider, Avenue B. Of course, continuing this through would probably be, we would probably call it Coal Creek Road. But just for continuity's sake, we've left this as Avenue B. A lot of the documents refer to Avenue B. Coal Creek Road this is a completely new alignment. This whole piece here changed, as I've said. So we would have the pathways and the trails. We would have do two things. One is for the on-street bikers, the serious bikers that are not scenic bikers. We would keep them on Coal Creek Road, and they would come right through the pedestrian promenade. Then they could have their choice. Most likely they'd come down to Street 1 and make it over to Marshall, and they'd continue across to Marshall where they bike currently. So we can have this option like this, and of course there's a couple of options in here as to where they go. And then for the casual walker and bike rider, we have peeled off a trail right over here that would connect up, and we would really mimic the US 36 trail, because right here at this point, the US 36 trail actually breaks away and goes under the 36 onto the Louisville side of US 36 over by Vista Hospital. So we would continue this trail connection, and that would provide the trail as you're coming along the US 36. You could continue on this trail straight down into Coal Creek. And of course we have the trail will also connect here to come into the community, and also down here and also right here. So we'll have several connections to the Coal Creek Trail, but it seemed that we should provide this opportunity to connect up. And so so that we have that. Then we identified previously we were suggesting a feature on the edge of the village green would be this pre-K site, the 2-acre site for BVSD. And here we've accomplished virtually the same thing. We really like the connectivity to the village green. And then, of course, we have all the other features that we've discussed with the orientation, the pedestrian orientation of all the housing or live work or whatever, all the structures built along Avenue B will recognize Avenue B as a strong pedestrian promenade and have that strong orientation, including balconies and accessibility, so that sort of as you were to, for example, walking down Main Street in Louisville, you see that the buildings, you can't, some of them were old houses that were turned into stores and restaurants and things like that. So that's sort of how we envision that.
Randy, can I ask you a question about? So if you do that layout, then you're not going to have any exit point through by Discovery Park, correct?
Discovery Park.
Well, the office.
Discovery Parkway?
Yeah,
Yes.
the office building up here.
Right here. We would have a trail connection, so here, from here to here is 40 feet in height, in elevation. So we would have a trail connection to that existing dead-end road there. There could be an emergency access, for any time other than when there's ice on the road. It would work fine. So, but that right here, we've part of what we've done is in the previous plan, as I was mentioning, we had 4.5% grade going up there. We had 5% grade coming up Avenue B, so that was quite a steep grade. And as I discussed before, but just to touch on it now that we have an exhibit to show, when this Avenue B was coming up at 5%, everything was impacted because we were trying to make this connection that's way up in the air. And so now we have brought this down to a 3% grade, which is quite a bit lower. My goal when we get into final design would be to get us to 2.5% grade if we can. That's really, really strong pedestrian fill. San Leo Hills is 4%, and your staff has walked through San Leo Hills. In my lessons learned, I think that's a little too much. It pushes the entries back, and it's a little bit of work, pushing strollers up. Do it once, it's fine, but if you do it every day, it's suboptimal. So, and we want people to walk this every day. So our goal is to get that down to 2.5% grade. It's half the grade that it was at 5%. And we can achieve that by disconnecting these two roads. Yes.
So Randy, you're bringing Coal Creek up basically through the center and then connecting it with the pedestrian area. If we anticipate that Coal Creek being a feeder from Rock Creek is going to have more traffic rather than less, bringing, that the people who live in Rock Creek will use it to come up. Is there any merit to actually having it connect with Avenue C and coming around? Because you're going to have a commercial entity there on Avenue C. You've got a commercial entity further north on Avenue C, so keeping that traffic on the heavier traffic, the intention of heavier traffic, and keeping it out of the residential areas.
So our evaluation of that is to just traffic, is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity when you're trying to create a vibrant commercial hub. And so because we do expect traffic here, our traffic consultant has evaluated this plan and rerun calculations and told us that the main thing we have to do is we have to give up on the idea that one day, under some odd set of circumstances, there might be 1,900 residential units. So if we take our application and take it down to 1,400 units, which is the maximum that we really think is reasonable, given the office and the retail, and now that we have the agreement with BVI and Cornerstone, that reduces that the conceptual potential peak traffic. And so by doing that, disconnect, and this network all works, but it's really focusing on the heart of your question of traffic. Traffic to us, we put a lot of effort into redesigning this to bring this traffic so it really helps anchor and make this town square, allows us to get viable businesses that are successful so that we can fill up that town square and keep those businesses successful and active. So the more traffic, the more traffic that's on Coal Creek Road, the better. We'd still want to connect that and have it on both sides, anchoring the town square.
So where are we on the on-street parking then on Coal Creek?
Thank you for reminding me to comment on that. So from this point south, from this entire length of Avenue B, there's no on-street parking. It's a median divided road. We, for traffic calming, again, we don't, bike riders don't prefer to have designated, the 5-foot, 7-foot bike lane and then the driving lane, because the cars go, they want to see how close they can get their rearview mirror to the bike rider. So we try to encourage there to be one lane and the bikers ride in the lane, and it's a bit of a wider lane. So here we have 20-foot drive lanes. We have a center median, no on-street parking, and we have I believe it's a 12-foot sidewalk from here to here on both sides of the street. And down here, as this is more residential and there's a transition, and there's less, here's the two anchors, right, with the fields and the restaurant here, the hotel, and what's going on up here. We have this anchor. We have the Southern Village Green with our restaurant down here, the pre-K, and so that's our strong pedestrian promenade that I described. And as we get down here, we would have on-street parking, and we would continue to have the 12 feet of sidewalk on either side. The road width gets a little bit narrower. We're trying to slow the cars down, preparing them to say, okay, because from this point here, I think that's Street 8, all the way down to Rock Creek Parkway, Coal Creek Road, it comes
Change here
into
with Rock Creek.
to Rock Creek Parkway. So from that point, all the way down Rock Creek Parkway, off the exhibit, all the way up, it's an unloaded street. So the cars can end up going faster on an unloaded street. And so at this point here, our proposal is to have on-street parking, start slowing the cars down as they approach the pre-K site and the Village Green. So we'll slow them down for 3 blocks. Cars, and the advice that we received from our traffic engineers and land planners is cars will really only drive slower for their own safety. They don't want to hit somebody, but they really, as you have to narrow their field of vision, you have to introduce conflicts. On-street parking makes it safer for the pedestrian, and so because with the on-street parking, you have cars driving down the road. They have to look and see if someone's going to be opening their door. Cars are a lot more alert on narrower streets with on-street parking. So that is the approach here. And then as we get up here, again, there's a lot going on. It is a wider street. We hope to have more activity. We have a curve here, so that will also tend to slow the car down because it doesn't have that long field of vision. But I would say, we also have the center median. So even though we have the wide street, we don't have on-street parking protecting the pedestrians. We have a wide pathway, 12-foot pathway, and we might have to introduce the loathed speed bump or something like that. The segment from here to here, I'm most concerned about the speed because it's, like I said, it's there's no conflict. Hopefully, there's enough bike riders that will slow the cars down.
When you hit the Village Green there, and you've got the 2 skinny roads on either side, are those one way?
Yes.
So the traffic coming north on Coal Creek will always go to the right, and the traffic coming south will always go to the left.
That's right. Sort of if you were going west on Pearl Street.
Right.
And as right when you hit it.
So this may be a question more for staff, but the long-term vision of Coal Creek as it goes south out of the town center would be that there would be traffic mitigation through that area. It's a very wide, we restriped it so it wasn't
Right.
2 lanes in both directions, so that was helpful, but I think that there's been discussion that there would be hardscape changes there that would help mitigate traffic as well.
Yeah, staff's vision for the existing South Coal Creek Drive is to put a permanent landscape median in there and make it with separated drive aisles.
And the timing of that would correspond to what was happening in the town center?
We do those at the same time we made a connection.
Okay. Thanks.
And then addressing another planning challenge that was addressed, and making sure that previously we had a narrower strip of office, and the concern was expressed that because of that narrow strip, the buildings might be intended to be aligned parallel to the 36, and that there was guidance not to allow those office buildings to be a shield or a barrier visually. We want to provide peeks into the community to let people know there's something interesting going on here, so they come over here. And so what we did is we significantly increased the depth of the office in here, and to allow the buildings to be oriented with the narrow end towards the 36. And so the buildings would be oriented this way instead of this way.
Can you describe, I was noting that, can you describe how that was achieved? Were the blocks 5, 6, 7, and 8, were those decreased? I can't quite tell how you were able to do that.
The angle of Avenue C, the whole angle of the grid in the south was twisted more southwest,
Okay.
sort of counterclockwise. And that created this opportunity to not just have a pure rectangle, but to pull it away. And then by connecting Coal Creek down to the Avenue B and disconnecting it from Avenue C, that allowed us to significantly increase the width of that office zone.
How many buildings are there?
We have that programmed for 4 buildings that could contain up to 100,000 square feet.
So if we divide that roughly into fourths with a little line of vision in it, we can sort of duplicate that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You would have more significant visual peeks into what's going on.
And they're 3-story? They're up to?
That's the next exhibit where
Okay.
we need guidance. That's the proposal. I want to talk about the stories, but yes, that is the proposal. We were trying to focus on building height as we, maybe I'll just, we can go
Well,
back and forth.
before you go there, though, then we can go back and forth if
That's
you
okay.
like. Just in terms of circulation, so are there stop signs throughout? What's the traffic control devices through that? Obviously, there's a roundabout and there's one-way streets, but the majority of how's traffic controlled through there? I mean, the whole project in
Well,
general.
this is Avenue B is the primary circulation corridor. Our goal is to bring traffic through here, so other than when you approach the Village Green, I don't expect that there would be stop signs or stoplights. It would be a two-way stop, and because our goal would be to bring, it should be not so fluid that it's a cut-through, but it should be fluid enough that if you're around there, if your goal is to come into the village, the town square, we want to draw you up here. If your goal is to kind of race through and shave off a minute, we want to make it not convenient. So we have to find that balance, and a lot of times that just takes, you build the roads, you see how people use it, and you have to modify it.
So Avenue C would be not controlled, and then the streets, for example, 1 Main, 3rd, all those would have stop signs and then when you go south, I guess, into that area too, they'd have stop signs as they connect. Like in the core area, for example.
In the core area here?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Here, at these intersections, there would be stop signs here. Yes. In the core. And like a traditional downtown, there are 4-way stops.
4-way. Okay.
Yeah. And when you get into the town core, our goal is we want every car to stop and go look around and say, oh, I should go there, instead of just driving by.
Okay. Trustees, comments?
Down in the part where there's a curved street, down, at the very bottom. Almost
here.
there. Nope, go. There you go. There used to be another curved street down a block further, right? It used to be that you had several curved streets down there.
Yes,
so
somebody
you've
refers to
lost-
the scallops.
Right. So you've lost a block or something, but my question has to do with then how wide you've made those blocks above. Are they still like 1/10 of a mile, like a
They're still
lower block,
a traditional
less or what?
traditional downtown block, 300 to 450, 500 feet, something like that. So,
Thanks.
Okay. Anything about this map, and otherwise we'll go on to the next one. Trustee Pennington?
I see Alex in the room, right? Is he still here? There, Alex. Anybody who can provide me a corollary street that exists in the town of Superior or Louisville that would resemble the width of Coal Creek Drive as planned here with the same level of on-street parking. I got to go drive it, and I've got to see what I think about it.
Yeah, he's got some visuals.
Great, but do you have something I can actually drive on? It's like...
He does. He has
Okay, good.
real-life examples for you.
Okay. Well, so while he's hunting that up, what was the long-term plan for Discovery Drive? I mean, wasn't it intended to go all the way through
Yeah,
at some point? And how did we deal with that grade in those long-term plans?
Well, it was always envisioned to connect, but the details for connection were never
Right.
looked at in that sort of detail. Not
Yeah.
until the development comes forward would we look at it in that type of detail.
I don't know if this was where Chris was going, but I actually find losing that connection to McCaslin as, it's too bad, actually.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. I like the idea of having that second exit there. Now, I couldn't imagine that residents would want to take the back way through Coal Creek to come around McCaslin and get on the highway, and that if everybody's got to go through the town center and go on those sharp curves and there's stop signs there, when people are going to work first thing in the morning, is that going to create problems, backup traffic in the town center? And I guess that maybe that's a question for Alex to address.
So Randy, I like the modifications you made to the grade on B. I think that's totally reasonable. That's supposed to be pedestrian-oriented. Plus, the senior and empty nester generation may actually live down there, and that becomes even more important for walkability to have that at a decent grade. But are there modifications that could be made to Discovery Drive that actually, have walls up? Retaining walls up that actually allow the street to be lowered and have it... I just came back from San Francisco. If you can drive on those streets, I'm hoping we can figure out a way to drive on Discovery Drive.
well, in San Francisco, you don't have the ice.
Right?
So that really, really changes,
Right.
the what you can do.
But if we put retaining
You also
walls...
didn't rebuild San Francisco. I'm not familiar with, because, we have, the fire codes are federal, and a lot of the street grades, the maximum grade is 12 to 15%, and that's, for fire response and fire accessibility going up a hill. So you really couldn't rebuild San Francisco anywhere in the country today that I'm aware of.
I'm not suggesting you do that, but the point is it doable if you think in terms of retaining walls that allow you to lower the road and retain the edges?
Yeah, addressing your point of, is it doable, how could you do it? You would have to reprofile, which is an engineering word for lower the elevation of Discovery. We looked at that, and at their last drive entrance into their office building, you would have to start regrade, tear out the existing road, and start bringing it down so that at its current terminus, it's 20 feet lower. And then we'd have the distance to provide a connection. I've actually met with the Awitas and talked to them about that, and they're very happy with the situation that they have there with their land. They don't want to sell any of their land. They don't want to trade any of their land. They don't, and to do that type of regrading would extend significantly beyond the right-of-way for the current public road. So I guess it's something that down the road, maybe that comes together. I think there's a win-win situation that I've tried to articulate and discuss with the Awitas. But again, when somebody has private property and they're happy with it the way it is, and it works for them and for their investment, they invested in that, I get that. really sensitive to that. They invested in that property, and they have another office building site or a couple of office building sites. They just seem happy with that, and so we didn't push it.
Trustee Skumatz?
So I think you made it pretty clear last time that there was sort of a choice. Given the grades, there was a choice between connecting to Coal Creek or to Discovery. And I actually like the direction you took, because I think we've already got a connection to McCaslin, and this allows a connection to the neighborhood, which I think is great. So I appreciate that. If it turns out that there's great traffic in here and busyness, it may be that the Discovery Park decides it's in their best interest to change that elevation. I don't know, but
Sure, I think there's opportunities.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think there are opportunities, and it's also, you can appreciate when our project's not approved, from their perspective, how much money do they want to spend evaluating, whether they're going to regrade their entire project, because it's a lot of money, and they don't really have anything to gain until our project is real. And they've made the point that for 15 years they've watched, developers come and go, and they've talked to all of them.
That goes back to the question, however, what were the agreements at the time Discovery Park, the first building, was put in? And I want to make sure that we're currently up to date as to what those agreements were and what the intent of that road was, and that we're still very knowledgeable about what that was, and haven't forgotten something, because my understanding was it was planned to go through, so...
Well, there's no agreements other than they were required to build the road to their property line, which they did. And then it's up to the town and future property, the developer of those properties to the east to match up with that road, or the town can decide if it wants to do some other type of connection.
And there were no grade studies done at that time that required anything? I mean, obviously, we knew the grade.
No, they had to build the road to their property line. That was their requirement.
And just addressing the traffic concern, to us, it's a great opportunity this presents a better opportunity to push more traffic into the town square. And as you heard from Katie Press, she was concerned there's not enough traffic in front of these retail outlets. This would increase that traffic. So if we found out that there was a lot more traffic, that would be fantastic. It would help the town square, it would help the type of tenants, the vibrancy of the businesses that exists in the town square. And as far as intersections in urban areas go, there's we're not trying to push people through the town square really, really fast. We're happy with them stopping and having 3 or 4 cars in front of them when it's busy, and looking at the stores and the restaurants and figuring out that they're going to stop.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you telling me it's to your advantage not to have Discovery Park go through? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think this alternative, it's possible that we suffer from being optimists, and we've been accused of that before, and so sometimes when you're an optimist, you like the latest thing you've done. As we figured out how we were going to revise the plan to address the direction, we revised it. We didn't just do it and say, well, let's create a plan that no one likes. So let's see if we can create a plan that's better. And we've worked on this plan, and we all looked at it, and then we didn't really know until Jim reported he has been working with the traffic analysis. They reran the traffic, and they said, looks like it's going to work. So then we really like the plan. So with all of that, yes, we like this plan better for a number of...
Better than what, Randy?
Better than the plan before, the iteration before. We've had many iterations of the Southern plan. After the Planning Commission hearing, we got direction as well. And our goal is to not go backwards. Our goal is to keep accumulating direction and continue to revise the plan and allow the plan to evolve to address concerns and ideas and opportunities. So this is the latest plan. It's a sincere plan. if it's the direction you choose to go, we'll be very, very happy with it. We can live with any of the plans we've presented. This is our latest plan. We've sincerely, put a lot of effort into making the plan that we think is better and addresses your concerns. So to that extent, we like this plan.
Trustee Skumas, then Trustee Hansen, then Trustee Williams.
I do have one question about the design at the previous slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know it meant going back to a whole other thing. There you go. So what happens in that lower left where you've lost the last scallop?
What happens here?
Yeah, where it used to be a road.
Well, these would be addressed with internal streets for the house, for the homes.
I mean, so it's going to be homes along there and they'll just have bigger yards or what? Not there. The missing block. There you go, that one right there, right
Yes,
in there.
that's a residential.
More parking here? More
No,
park?
No, this is this color here. This sort of shows up. It's tan on my version. It's somewhat greenish tan on this version. That's residential.
Okay.
And so we would, in the future, come forward with an FDP and show you with the housing products that we've identified, we would present housing that would have to have its own access. So there would be private streets. This is the public street system. There would be private streets for access to houses. But I want to go back and address something that Trustee Pennington raised earlier. If we like this plan, everything I said, I still continue to believe in what I said 5 minutes ago. If we were able to reprofile Discovery and bring it down so that there could be a connection, one day there'll be more office space up here. We believe, and we presented a plan where we said if we reprofile Discovery, bring it down, then those office pads will be bigger, which would allow, and with what we're doing here, we know that the most oversupplied market is office land. It's everywhere, but it's not everywhere in this environment with the mixed use, and we think it'll be very exciting. So I think there's still an opportunity for this property, particularly this edge here, and we have this property here. They have sort of a funky alignment here because the road comes here. This is not, for commercial space, you want a rectangle, a flat rectangle to build an office building. And so I do believe there's a strong opportunity to work with the owners of this property and to show that they'll be better off. They're business people, private property owners, at one point in time down the road, we'd like to get them to spend money to verify the information we've provided. It's not always straight up when somebody shows up and says, I have a way for you to make more money. They have to spend time with their engineers and planners verifying it. But I do think there's a way for that to happen, and then we would really like it because it would bring more of these office users. It would connect them. We'll have trail connections, but not everybody. People dream about trails more than they use them a lot of times.
Let's see, where did we get Trustee Hansen and Trustee Williams?
So I like the connection there to Coal Creek. I think it's great. But I'm wondering how many cars are actually going to be coming down from Rock Creek down through to go to the town center. Because the people that live in that area, that's going to be more of an inconvenience. They're not going to drive to the town center. They're going to walk to the town center, right?
I think they do both. In this area right here, it's going to be a pretty easy connection. I'm pointing at, for the people that aren't looking at the screen, the 2012 aerial map where Rock Creek Road comes up, and the homeowners in that northeast portion that adjoin Coal Creek Road. This area here, there's a couple hundred homes within a 15-minute walk of downtown. So that 15-minute walk it's a national statistic. I think in Boulder, my guess is it's at a 20-minute walk, 25-minute walk, people would still walk more.
Okay.
So I do agree that there'll be a lot of the walkers. There'll also be, for every person that walks, there's 5 that'll drive.
Even from within the residential right here, they will get in their car and drive to here.
Yes.
Okay.
They're going to shop big.
that
They're going to shop really big.
That interaction and that dynamic changes. When you fill up your on-street parking, and then people know, you want to fill up the on-street parking, but at the same time you're filling up the on-street parking, there's more going on there, and then it's people, will go out of their way and they'll walk farther. When, times of day when there's not a lot of activity, or when the on-street parking is convenient and right in front, people will drive there. They'll be more inclined to drive there. And then once people know that it's active and there's things going on, they'll be more inclined to walk. And that helps the business not just be successful Friday and Saturday night, but 7 days a week.
Okay. Trustee Williams?
Okay, I have a lot of new toys here, so I'm not quite used to operating them. So, what I wanted to know here is the extension to Coal Creek Drive you've done. This is new. And how about, have you considered Campus Drive to Avista Hospital, as far as, bringing those folks to Avista Hospital and vice versa, Louisville, Avista, so that your town center here, or our town center here, is more activated
Mr.
in what
Mayor,
you're looking for?
I want you to answer, but Matt, do you have any updates about anything?
Yeah, so that was one of the comments we received from the city of Louisville, and we're hoping that on the July 8th meeting during the work session that we'll have something that we can put together for you to look at to try to get a good feel of what it might look like or feel like with the plan. The problem is the way it's proposed, it's going to go right through that office land right there. So, and the city of Louisville is proposing an overpass.
Right.
My opinion, an underpass, since we already have an underpass there, would probably be a better choice. But there's some issues on their side with the hospital and stuff like that. So.
But I wanted Randy's opinion. As resource, Matt and I already talked about it, and I wanted your opinion. Would that help your concerns about the town center?
I think there's a healthy arm wrestling going on, because it's widely known now that Avista Hospital has provided a letter of intent to open an urgent care and MRI imaging facility in the first floor of the Cornerstone building. So you're going to have your emergency services, in Superior, right in the town square. And
So for all those folks that are there, getting to Avista Hospital, they've got to go this way, they've got to go this way. This is like a natural connection that couldn't we create somehow? We have a great opportunity to do that.
So again, focusing on traffic, people going to and from the hospital are, first of all, hospital use is a low volume traffic, and it's a low intensity use. So, the number of people in a hospital per square foot versus in a retail or an office building, it's the lowest, lower than hotels. And just the size of the hospital and the corridors and the areas that just the square feet per population is pretty low. So the other aspect is people tend to go, there's a concept called action space. People tend to go where they've been. If you drive a road and you see something there, you may not stop that time, but you say, oh, there's a caribou there, or something that you just didn't know. How often have you driven down a street, a new street, and you go, oh wow, look what's here, and now you know it's there, and someday you'll go back to that spot. And so in the planning jargon, they call that your action space. We like having the urgent care in the town center. We think it's a lot more accessible, a lot more convenient than the urgent care and the emergency room over at Avista. And we think regionally that will help our town square, because people will drive there when they don't want to, right? It's an emergency by nature. And then they'll be able to see what we have going on, and that will be in their action space. So we really like that. I think if the stronger you make the arm wrestling tug of war is if you provide a really straight route over to the hospital. It wouldn't make sense for them to open an urgent care and MRI imaging over here, and then people
for
can
me-
drive to the hospital.
For me, I think getting the people from Louisville to the town center would be a little bit more what I'm looking at as far as, how, are there other connections that you can see that we could be doing that would help jumpstart our town center?
On Deborah's point, urgent care and, we've got a doctor here, urgent and emergent are two different things. Urgent closes at 10 p.m., right? I had to use it a couple weeks ago. It closes at 10 p.m. Emergent care is round the clock. So I don't see one negating the reason for having the other, particularly if we are going to have senior housing facilities down in that neck of the woods. And then the other thing is just what Deborah said, is Campus Drive could well provide a nice connection to Louisville proper, which is what I think Troy West's point was, is it's just a nice connection to Louisville. So,
Just calling it Campus Drive, basically.
Well, as it relates to service for seniors, we just sort of break it down into pieces. From our perspective, the hospital is very, very close. It's regardless of whether there's a road there or not, it's very, very close for the services for seniors. And that would be the service for the senior to go to the hospital, because if the senior calls 911, right, the ambulances and the fire response handles that. So already we see Vista Hospital as a great asset, and making it 2 minutes closer or 3 minutes closer is not going to make it a better asset.
But we learned from the fire department, though, that if they got called to someone's house, they may not take them to Vista, right?
Depends on what's going on.
That they may take them to a whole other hospital.
That is very true.
So, I don't know if that's a benefit.
I'm not sure about that. I think they have to ask you they have to say, we're going to this hospital, and you can say, no, I want to go to Vista. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he said that they under some contract or something, they have to take them to some, whatever approved hospital is that they are approved to go to. And if Vista's not always the one, their first choice. So anyway.
I'm just trying to keep it simple. The saleability, if a senior, I'm going to define one as 70 to 75 years old, who's looking for a place to age, right? And if this has Campus Drive there, and if our senior amenity are like in block, I need more glasses here, that top block of your new rectangular subdivision, is that 12?
The top block,
One over, no, one over, down next to your commercial space. Your, no, way over by 36.
Do you have
Yeah.
a pointer?
They're right there.
Yeah, that top block next, contiguous. There, or the big one, right next to that. If that's where the senior amenities are, and I'm a 70 or 75-year-old looking to locate somewhere, it just gives me comfort and probably makes this property more sellable to me, because I'm right at the hospital. 2 minutes matters if you're having a heart attack. 3 minutes matters.
And keep in mind, the underpass is right there, too.
So,
That connects right to the Vista Hospital.
Via ambulance?
It'll be wide enough for a vehicle, but it's
Are you saying it would be easy to put in?
let's explore this. I don't think we'll, so there seems to be some interest in having an additional connection to Louisville, whether or not that's an overpass, an underpass, or 88th Street. Probably need to explore that some more. My take on this is that I don't think seniors care where their hospital is. Most of them are 30 minutes away from wherever they're going, but if ConocoPhillips, not that they're coming, but if something like that happens on Campus Drive, you want the people in that place to be able to drive to the town center. So I don't see it as people going that way. I think it's more important to have people coming from Louisville into the core. So I have no idea what's going to happen on the ConocoPhillips site, but it's just more business opportunity to you, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the most recent conversations, it sounds like, that have been happening. Addressing the question, spending money to increase the connection, to improve the connection to Avista doesn't make any sense to us, and we don't think it would help our project. We can't commit to a design now for a concept across the road, down the road. When situations evolve, there's portions of the project that haven't been built out. We're all going to be looking to do a better job down the road, and we can make changes down the road if it's not built out. But once it's built out, it's built out, and we have to, assume that we're able to move forward with.
I agree. So, at least from my perspective, so thank you for putting Cold Creek Drive it, but we either need 88th Street or something else over that way, because we don't want all the traffic to go down Cold Creek Drive if you're going to try to, get to Monarch High School or wherever you happen to be going. You don't want to drive everybody down Cold Creek Drive, down Rock Creek Parkway, back down to 88th Street. You want some other pathway, and whether or not that's Campus Drive or 88th Street connection, whatever it is, there needs to be one additional access point.
And I just want to emphasize, make sure everyone's aware that we do not own the property. There's an intervening property between us and Rock Creek Ranch.
Okay.
That's down here. This sort of looks like a sock or a Italy. So.
Okay.
So
and
maybe
I just want to throw out there also, pardon me.
For future purposes, or is it on there and I'm just not making it out, where does 88th come through?
Here on our exhibit?
Yeah.
It doesn't. We don't.
No, where would it be if it, where is it?
Well, it's way off site. So,
Okay.
88th Street's way over here. I mean, yeah, relatively, it would be somewhere down in the corner. You can see that 88th Street is way off site. I'm trying not to stand in your way, but 88th Street is way off site over here, and this whole property here that looks like, a sock is
That's Anderson?
the Anderson property. So it's quite a bit disconnected from us. If 88th Street came around, you can see we've pushed this Cold Creek connection to the far southeastern edge of our property. You could, if you decided to, I haven't looked at the engineering or design and whatnot, but we've pushed this connection all the way to the southeast corner. I imagine you could connect up 88th somewhere over there as well. I also want to make sure and mention that when this issue came up, I went and met with David Smith, the COO of Avista, and talked to him about connectivity. We talked about the underpass. They designed their hospital. The underpass is there, but they don't want to see it as a connecting road going through. Because it would go into their parking lot, and there's no through road to get over to Campus Drive. But as your staff mentioned, the road could accommodate emergency vehicles from our project, and we may be able to accommodate from their urgent care to their hospital, a gated situation just for them.
So it sounds like, unless I'm missing something, then the city of Louisville government needs to be on the same page as city of Louisville Avista Hospital, because I'm getting conflicting
I would agree.
requests. So maybe we can clarify all
That's
that
where-
somewhere down the road.
Pardon me, that's where I said I think there's maybe the page that they're on can't be the same page, because Vista Hospital has an LOI to, I think they see this as happening, and they've put time and effort into understanding the application and made a letter of intent to put an urgent care and an MRI imaging and also a pharmacy in the first story of the Cornerstone building. And so it's very conceivable that Louisville doesn't like that and would like to keep everything on their side. And so if there's a road, why would they do that?
Okay. All right, well, you get the concern.
Do you want to, Trustee
unless
Williams
there's
asked about the heights?
Yeah,
some of
unless
that,
there's anything
staff?
else on this particular one, but then we can move on to the
Staff was going to talk about traffic, and we've just been talking
Oh,
about
yes,
traffic.
right.
Traffic, do you want
Yep,
to?
let's do traffic.
Alex Arnell, Director of Public Works and Utilities, and I'm responding to Trustee Pennington's concern about visuals and what these streets are going to look like and what are some examples. What I tried to do is and you're going to look at street sections as one of your sheets in the PD. And so I'm going to go over several of these, give you some visuals and try to translate widths into pictures and feel and so forth. Let me just start in terms of road design. A typical car is about 6 feet wide, and a pickup, extended cab pickup, maybe 7 feet wide, and a truck is about 8 feet wide. A typical lane on a freeway is 12 feet wide. So a car traveling down there 6 feet wide has 3 feet on each side, and you design that for 65 miles an hour. Your freeway lane is 12 foot wide. When you get into lower design speeds, and we've talked a lot about McCaslin, we want to narrow the lane widths, and you can go on down to 11 when you have about 40 miles an hour. When you get into an urban area, you can even go down to 10-foot lanes, okay? Because you're going slower, you don't need as much room on the outside. However, you got to think about trucks. Big tractor trailers are about 8 feet, and so those have a little difficulty with the 10-foot lanes, but if they move slow enough, they can do it. Your parking lane is usually about 7 feet wide. So I wanted to give you those dimensions. So one of the sections that was discussed was having diagonal parking on both sides with 2 travel foot lanes, and these, I think, were 10.5-foot lanes on this particular section. This is section 2, a 90-foot right-of-way, and it has buildings coming up to the right-of-way line. So it's 90 feet between the buildings, and then you have the diagonal parking, and then you have a pedestrian strip of 12 to 14 feet, and that could be paved or could have planters. So that's kind of a diagonal. So what does that look like in practice? So this is Walnut Street in Boulder, kind of periphery to the mall, and this has diagonal parking on both sides. And when I talk about these widths here, I'm talking about the flow line to flow line, where the curb meets the gutter, that dimension from the curb to the curb. So in this particular case, they have diagonal parking on a little bit narrower section, 54 feet wide, and you can see they have, in this case, 3 or 4-story buildings, diagonal parking, and that's kind of the feel with landscaping on that particular section.
And what are we proposing? How wide?
61 feet.
So go back, please.
And go
50
back, and I think we're
Yeah.
going to have some discussions
Yeah.
about
So 54, so this is 61, theirs is 54.
61 from the curb, from here, and then 90 foot would be the right-of-way when you take into account the sidewalk and parkway strip. So this is a little wide, and we've been discussing the width of the diagonal parking, and some of they have a pan here, so they're instead of the water flowing to the curb and gutter on the outside, they're collecting drainage in this 2-foot pan between the diagonal parking and the travel lanes. So that's why it got a little bit wider. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. So that's Walnut Street. This is Pearl Street on the west end of the mall, where you have diagonal parking on one side and parallel parking on the other side. If you remember the Daily Camera building? Okay,
Yes.
and the 3, 4, 5-story buildings here, and you know all the activity you have here. So here you have diagonal parking on one side, and this particular street is 48 feet wide. This is at 29th Street, at the shopping mall, and here this is very wide, 76 feet wide from the curb to the curb. And the reason why they have the pan going down, the 2-foot pan, but they also provide bike lanes, so it's an added width. And not only do they have walk here, but they have stepped-up walk. So if you have the feel, feels really wide if you've been there, this part of...
And it feels dead and no one ever crosses, yeah.
Right, right.
And when do these get too wide?
Right.
This
Yeah,
is
I
too
mean, this
wide.
is almost
one's
feels
too
too wide, you know.
I would agree.
I remember Carl
think that's his
talking
point.
about that.
Okay, so this is Front Street in Louisville, 54 feet wide, and they've kind of finished off one side with the wide sidewalk, diagonal parking. They haven't finished off the other side. The railroad tracks are down here. One of the reasons why I want to show you this one, this is I think it's Steinbach. Here's where the ice skating rink
Steinbach.
is. And this is where they close off the street and they have their community events, because they have a wide street now to do the community events. So I just wanted to show you that example. This is one in Englewood. And here we have 58-foot wide diagonal parking with the 3 or 4 story buildings. Okay, so the next section I want to look at is the parallel parking on both sides, and this is, this is section 4. It's one of the loop streets in the core area. We have parallel parking on each side, 12-foot sidewalk, parkway strip, and parallel parking. And this is section 5, and you widen out in certain areas where you allowed a wider area for the building and for cafe parking, cafe seating, and so on.
So, go back to this. How wide is the driving?
This is 35 feet wide, so you have 10.5-foot lanes and 7-foot parking lanes.
And are we going to allow semi-traffic through Town Square? Is it going to be allowed up Coal Creek
We'll have
Drive?
to allow, we'll have to allow delivery trucks, and we have restaurants, and they have,
So how do we intend to funnel delivery traffic, though? Is it going to go wherever it wishes to go?
What we do is we take our design vehicle, big tractor trailer, and we circulate it through the core area to make sure that trucks can make the turns and so forth. And we make sure areas where they have difficult making turns, that we have ways that they can traverse the curb. We don't want them traversing the curb. We looked at all those areas and make sure that they can make the turns. And it's typical that when they make a turn, they take up the opposite travel lane in this type of urban environment. If you accommodate those types of trucks, for pedestrian, you get wide intersections, you get wide streets, and it's not as pedestrian friendly. So there's a trade-off between providing a pedestrian friendly street and a street that has commercial traffic. I mean, we don't intend to have a lot of those types of trucks going through, but we can accommodate them. So a few of those streets. This is in the Highlands area. If you've been down in the Highlands area, again, 2 or 3 story buildings, 12-foot wide sidewalk, and this is 38-foot. I took all these distances, I measured on Google, so it could be a couple of feet off. But this is the Highlands area, and if you've been down there, that's a nice, older area, grid pattern type area.
Those are 12-foot roads then, right? Because you've got 7 and 7 is 14, 38, 24, they're 12-foot roads,
Yeah, for this,
12-foot lanes.
12, these are probably 11-foot lanes and 7-foot parking stalls, so 22 plus 14 is 36, 38.
Can we get any of those with cars coming at us and going,
Yeah,
we're
I'll show
showing
you a few.
empty streets.
Okay, so this is Main Street in Louisville, about 38 feet wide. Again, you have the parallel parking. There's a bus. The bus is going through. I mean, this is a little bit wider. This is 38 feet, a little wider than what we're proposing. This is over by the library in Louisville. Again, the 2 or 3 story building. Parking lane here, they bulbed out, and they provided the wall 38 feet wide on that one. This is 29th Street in Stapleton. Again, 3 story buildings with the parking, and here they actually created a turn lane by taking some of the parking away. So this is an area, if you need to accommodate trucks, you take some of the parking away near the curb and near the intersection, and so you restrict parking so the trucks can make the turn.
This is Pine Street in Boulder, just off of Broadway, just west of Boulder, and that's 34 feet wide. This is Pearl Street east of the mall. You know where the gondolier is? Gondolier is right over here. This is 48 feet wide. What they did here is they have on-street parking, travel lanes, and they have a turn lane, center turn lane. But you can see, this is about five or six block area with on-street parking, and they have several traffic signals and other unsignalized intersections. I want to show you this. I'm just turned around at the gondolier and looking at the mall. That's the Pearl Street Mall. Again, the on-street parking. What they did with the bulb out of the intersections, they shadowed the parking. They provide area for bike parking. Now here's the parking garage. So here's how they took a 5-story parking garage. They kind of hid it behind the buildings. They provided parking pretty close to the buildings that front the mall, which is similar to, I think, what we're talking about near the plaza. This is Old Wadsworth in Arvada, if you've ever been in that area. And that's, again, 34 feet wide with on-street parking and bulb outs. Here's a kind of a mid-block pedestrian crossing. I wanted to show you a few slides about plazas that I found to give you a feel of what they look and feel like with parking. This is in Englewood, if you remember old Cinderella City, and they redeveloped it, and this is the light rail station. So here you have, residential, 3- and 4-story residential with the parking in the middle. So what you see on the street is, building flush to the walk. Again, another residential building, and then here's some commercial buildings. I don't know, I think this is a commercial building as well. But here's kind of a plaza type area. And in terms of the parking, they put parking on one side and they kept the inside without parking in a typical plaza area. I'm not sure if it's the same type of function, but it's a plaza area that I found in the Englewood area. This is 29th Street in Stapleton. I showed you one picture looking this way of the 3- or 4-story buildings with the on-street parking, and then here's a plaza that comes around a fairly large commercial residential building, and so there's another plaza, and the feel of that, parking on one side and no parking on the other side. And there's some bike lanes, and again, plaza on one side and the taller buildings on the other side.
So just along the concept of bike lanes, so it seemed like this seemed like the unusual circumstance in the slides that you presented, even the ones in bicycle-friendly Boulder, there didn't seem to be any bike lanes at all.
Right, they don't have bike lanes, in the core area, the urban area. Where they did try to accommodate bike lanes was at 29th Street, and by doing that, I think it really widened the street, and to me, it made it less pedestrian-friendly. It's probably more bike-friendly. So that's a concept we need to hash through. Where are the bikes going to go once they get to the town core? Do they go up on the walks? And this is in Stapleton. They provided the on-street bike lane for a fairly long stretch. And this could be similar to what we could do on, where Coal Creek Drive comes into the town center. If we wanted to provide bike lanes and the on-street parking, there's no curb cuts here. There's no driveways. So we have parallel parking and then providing a curb, a bike lane, and then a regular travel lane. So that could be an option that we can look at and discuss. I
thought Randy said there's no on-street parking on Avenue B.
That's correct. You're right.
Okay.
Okay, so the one I think you're more interested in is this one.
The narrowest
This is the
one, by
narrowest
4
one.
feet.
This is 30 feet wide from flow line to flow line. So we have, 10 and a half foot, not even 10, we have 7, 14, at least 16 feet in the middle. We have on-street parking.
So how are you going to get a semi that measures 8 foot through there?
Okay, so this is Sagamore, 30 feet wide. Sagamore is 30 feet wide with 4 feet walks. So it's 38 feet right away from that, from the back of the walk to the back of the walk is 38 feet right away. So you have, now there's several issues with Sagamore. Both it's 30 feet wide, plus we have curb cuts, we have driveways, back out driveways all over the place. So you have those conflicts going on. You have pedestrians that really don't feel comfortable on the sidewalk. So, you know, there's a lot of differences between Sagamore and what we're proposing here. So I wanted to show you this and then show you some other pictures. Okay, so this is downtown Denver. I think this is what they're trying to achieve with a narrow walk, with on-street parking in a grid pattern. So you have alleys that take care of the service to your houses. You park on street, you have the parkway strip and the sidewalk. Now, where's the car? Here's the car. Where's the driving? It's driving in the middle of the street. So what happens on these streets, they're low speed, and you drive in the middle. When you have an oncoming car, you go slow and you kind of pass together or find a gap in the parking to get around.
Are they not striped?
No, they're not striped. So that's what happens with a 30-foot wide road. It's a very nice road to live on because you have very, very slow speeds because of the on-street parking. The fact that, you know, you don't have these two streams of very fast traffic. It really slows traffic down. And that's, I think, part of the things that we want to achieve in this particular street. So, I mean, whether that's appropriate for, this is a good local street, you know, in certain areas may work, whether that main area, that main drag for Coal Creek, maybe not. So we'll have to talk about whether that makes sense or not. I just saw it.
Coal Creek's 60 feet wide.
It's 60 feet right away. I haven't seen the plan, the cross-section for Coal Creek.
So what was just said about Coal Creek? What was just said about Coal Creek? How wide
It's
is it?
60 foot right away. But I'm not sure what the flow line to flow line.
We haven't designed it.
Oh, you haven't designed it?
Right.
Okay. So here's our local standard. It's 34 feet wide, providing for essentially 7-foot parking lanes, so that's 14 feet, plus 2 10-foot travel lanes. And we had a lot of discussion when we adopted our standards of whether to have a narrow road and provide that feel of you don't have 2 lanes, you have 1 lane, or to have, you know, 2 parking lanes and 10-foot lanes. So the Planning Commission had a number of discussions, so did the town board, and this is the standard that we settled on for the local street, 34 feet wide for the local street. Now, I'm willing, you know, to me, 30 feet, again, it's a Sagamore, and you got to be careful on how you design it. On that, if it's a collector, we had that debate early on whether Coal Creek was going to be a collector through the town center. If it was, we may want bike lanes. So we had that discussion. Initially, it wasn't going through there. It wasn't going to be a collector. Now it looks like more of a collector.
Castle Peak. Castle Peak's another problem street where you actually have a lot of parallel parking on both sides. You've got a lot of small children, a dense neighborhood, but nowhere as compacted as this is going to be. How wide gutter to gutter is Castle Peak?
They're a little wider. They're 32 or 36 feet, Castle Peak.
Which
We
one?
have some 32, I think we have some 32 feet streets.
You know, I'd be interested for future reference because to me, Sagamore does not work. Castle Peak does not work if we're designing something from scratch in which we've learned lessons.
Yeah. A lot of those streets, have those very narrow walks, 4-foot walks that they're sloped. You don't really want to ride your bike there, and it's not wide enough for 2 people to walk. So we're going to have separated detached walks in most of the area, so we'll have a better pedestrian environment.
And how wide are the sidewalks?
5 feet wide. So I just wanted to give you a feel of streets around the area and what they look like, what their feel is as you go through the cross sections.
Just to respond, as far as what staff said, emphasizing that we have designed the southern area to have a lot of alleys And so the alley takes a lot of conflict off the street, takes the drive cut off the street, so when you have a sidewalk, it's a flat sidewalk and it's not dipping every 45 feet. And it removes that conflict of cars coming, backing out of a driveway onto a street, slowing down traffic. Part of that is long, narrow streets. If it's a straight street, we need to have conflicts. We need on-street parking. We need to have the trees on the edge of curb as opposed to behind the sidewalk. Trees separating the curb from the sidewalk. We need to really narrow down that driver's field of vision. We need narrow streets. We need the trees, and we need on-street parking to slow traffic down and to make it a safe place.
If somebody's moving into the neighborhood though, and they've got a big semi, there was a big semi on our street the other day, and if it was too narrow, it'd be pretty tough to get around, so it's not gonna be an issue with somebody moving in, they bring a semi in to unload all their belongings.
Well, the movers are supposed to know where they're going to, and they're supposed to, the movers have all different size trucks. Also, the smaller the house, the smaller the truck. So we would expect to have the smaller moving trucks. Our largest home is going to be 2,500 square feet. And so we would expect to have the smaller moving trucks. And it's the same for our commercial tenants as well. Our commercial tenants, by our commercial CC&Rs, our Commercial Owners Association, will, their delivery vehicles will be restricted. It'd be up to the town. All these are public streets, so if the town wanted to also restrict the size, length of the commercial vehicles going through the town center, there's no reason for them to drive through just to drive through, but you could also, it's very common to post signs up and identify a restriction on the size of a commercial vehicle. But our commercial tenants, definitely, we will do that separate from whatever the town does. We will restrict the times of delivery and the maximum deliveries and vehicle size and locations of delivery.
So from my perspective, I share the concern about streets getting too narrow. I also understand the interest of increasing conflicts so that the traffic speed is less. Part of the problems on Castle Peak is that it's pretty long, pretty straight. People just blow through there. So, but it's something as narrow as 30, I could only see if that didn't have the curb cuts, had the detached sidewalk, had alleyway, loaded garages, because otherwise I think it's becomes way too much. So, but it sounds like that's what you're proposing anyway.
Yes.
What width did you just say?
If
Did
it's
you say
as
30?
narrow as 30, I could only see that would work if you had detached sidewalks
Yeah.
and that you had alley-loaded garages so that you didn't have the curb cuts with people. Part of the problem with Sagamore, I mean, there's a variety of issues, but one of them is that it's so dense with so many driveways back to back to back to back that it's very hard to navigate through there. So,
Yeah, I'm a skeptic on 30. I'm gonna have to have Alex find me one. There are plenty in these new, off-street garages, no driveways, inset sidewalks, et cetera. I'm gonna have to drive them and see, but no interest in repeating some of the traffic nightmares we already have.
okay. So, anything else with that? Otherwise, we'll probably move on to your building mass diagram.
Also, just going to building heights now, and to Trustee Williams' earlier question about building heights, we went back and looked at the approved PD for the town center core, and of course, throughout the entire town center core, the maximum height is 75 feet. The approved PD has everything, it sort of has appeared as an orange color, but all these buildings in orange, the gray were parking structures, so all these buildings in orange, everything you see from the street are 5-story buildings. In yellow, those are 6-story buildings, and the red are 4-story buildings. So it's predominantly 5- and 6-story buildings up to 75 feet in the approved PD. We have, I have a concept to review and get feedback on. Starting in the south, the south has a built-in feature with the annexation agreement. The annexation agreement has a calculation of height starting at some distance. Starting at the property line, there's a height restriction in the annexation agreement. So we're not proposing to change that at all. That is what it is. The first footnote up here says that the height limits in the annexation agreement will remain and will not be superseded. After that, we would propose to go an additional 300 feet at 32 feet. And so that 600 feet from the back of the property lines of the homes that are on the southern boundary. For 600 feet, there would either be no homes or they would be limited to 32 feet in height. And then in the area between, up to the core, we would have a 45-foot height limit. I need to look at my exhibit because I can't see the numbers.
55.
The purple is 55?
Yeah.
Okay. So we would have a 55-foot height limit. We, at one point, we were talking about stories, and in I think the exhibit we presented earlier today, we were talking about stories, and I was on a conference call with our architects as we were reviewing this, and they started talking about, well, you know, when you have stories, we don't want all the buildings. And when you have a story limit of 5 stories, then you end up having all the buildings kind of look the same. And really what we ought to have is our height limits in districts, where then we can have the architecture and all the buildings. You might have some neat feature in a building where, you know, a parapet or there's a rooftop something, whether it's a usable architectural feature or just an architectural feature sort of in the concept of, you know, community art or village art, of maybe it's a clock tower or some other feature. So what we're proposing is to focus just on building heights and by these districts. So this is would be the 55, everything in purple, and then 65 feet would be the buildings in red, and then in orange would just be the 65 feet. So there's just right on the town square. We had talked about taking the town square down to 55 feet, but the thought is that we need a portion of the town square. We want to distinguish it as a town square, and so for just a small piece of the town square right here, we would want that to go up to 65 feet for that small area.
65 or 75?
Yeah,
I think you-
Pardon me, yeah, I can't see the numbers up there, I apologize. So the orange is 75?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, pardon me, so as opposed to the approved PD, where everything was 75 feet and 5 stories, the only thing that would be 75 feet are in the town center are these 3 areas. This over here is the Cornerstone Medical Office Building, and before this came up, we've had discussions, and they're working on bringing in other medical office users and putting together their sort of magic formula of tenants. And so we've contemplated that at 5 stories. Over here, this is our alternative hotel site.
Where?
Right here, on the L format, right on Main Street on the east side of the town square. And then just the one component on the town square right here. And then all the rest of that is, those are the 75 feet. The only thing that would go up to 90 feet is this major hotel site on the north there. And then the rest would be 65 feet in red. And so we would have the buildings, we'd have more of a villagey atmosphere with different heights and different locations. And again, that would contrast to, again, the approved PD, where the colors are the same, but everything in this orange color is the 5 stories, and everything in the orange color is 6 stories. So there was just these 3 buildings were 4 stories, and so we sort of turned that around. Instead of having 3 buildings that are 4 stories and all the rest 5 and 6 stories, we would propose to have 3 buildings that are up to 75 feet, and most of the buildings would be in that 65-foot category, which would be the 4-story category. And then, of course, you have a lot in the 3-story category. And just going back, there was nothing in the 3-story category. It was all 5 and 6 stories. So if you might,
So can I-
staff will have this, you can go back and forth between
Yeah.
these exhibits.
So can I break in, and I know that Trustee Williams has, so just, this is obviously different than what we talked about 2 meetings ago when you said it'd be 2 and 3 stories with some buildings up to 4. This, I mean, given that there's some height distinction, so it would be 32 or 55, with some up to 65. This is different from what we talked about 2 meetings ago.
Well,
So
we wanted to put
there
it,
seemed to be some, this doesn't seem to jive with what I heard at that meeting.
and so we want to reconcile that, and that's why we went to absolute heights. One thing that we were focusing on is the actual livable space, but we have 1 story of parking. And so, we think of, 2 and 3 stories with tuck-under parking, but when you get to the building code, that's another story. So those are really 3 and 4-story buildings. And so we've identified here, that's again where we're going to just maximum height. So, whether you call it a 2-story building or a 3-story building, we have these height districts. So again, that's the focus, and the so that we're all talking the same language. We can measure the height based on the town code of how you measure height, and the height's the height.
Sure.
And you can see the transition. So we'd love to get feedback on this. This is our team's sort of collective feedback on how we cannot have, even if all the buildings are 3 stories, for example, and they're all 3 stories, that'll still look tall. You need something taller to make other things look smaller and to provide a variation. So this is our approach to how we can have the flexibility to provide the variation, and then we have a footnote in there that, subject to the approval of the town board, up to 25% of the space could come in at up to 75 feet. We might have a special user that comes in, and in the same context of allowing for 500 hotel rooms, we wouldn't want much of the space to go to that 75 feet, which is your current, PD, where everything's 5 and 6 stories and up to 75 feet. But what we're saying is we'd limit it to 25%. If you want to change that number, by the way, this is to get your response to that. Maybe that number is 15%. But it seems like there ought to be some percentage that's 75 feet, so that everything else can trickle down from there, and you can have a bit of a variation. You saw some of the imagery in Boulder and other places where you have these 5-story, and then you have other.
So
Wondering what an example is of a 75-foot building.
Well,
Is there a
I think
regional
your approved
example
PD
of
had.
I'm just asking about
75.
when it already exists, just so I can get a
What is the Renaissance, for example? How many feet tall is it?
It's 4 stories, I don't know what it, oh, the Renaissance?
The
Oh, I don't know,
Renaissance,
that's like 10 stories, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Just trying to get a sense.
So, okay. Well, I'll leave it for the moment, but the imagery that I saw, that all those are, I mean, there's a few.
I believe this building is 75 feet.
Right, so that one presumably is 75 feet, but most of the imagery is 2 and 3 stories, just
Right.
even the imagery that you provided us.
And
in the
that's where
packet.
some percentage, maybe 15%, would be up to 75 feet, and the rest is that
Okay.
transition 65, 55. That'd be really helpful guidance.
Okay.
But we think if it was all, like, for example, 3 stories and 45 feet, it would still get a monotonous sort of
Yeah.
tall sense.
That's why
We want to break it up.
I enjoyed the 2 to 4, that sort of broke it up, but just for right now. Trustee Williams?
So you're envisioning this all to be residential?
No.
Not this part?
The corridor?
Along that, that's,
Which one are you?
I'm sorry, where are we on the map here? Because I'm
So
looking at the
red.
red.
Yeah.
So this here in the town core, Main Street is all flex space. The 5 blocks that comprise the town square, the ground floor is commercial.
Okay, because I'm looking at this other one here that's showing it all to be residential in the red, which is the yellow over here. So, and
In the land use, in the land use
in the
concept.
land use.
In the land use concept, the whole zoning in the town square is PD zoning, right? And so this is the advice we've received from our consultants is 80,000 feet of specialty retail, local retail, restaurants and entertainment, boutique shops, that would be a good amount of space to be able to tenant and occupy. When that's occupied, some people think the retail market might become more vibrant than others. There's any place in here, if we get a great tenant that we think adds to the town center, we want to bring them in, we'll propose them, and we might, we would process an FTP for that specific site. So everything is flex. Our best estimate of where the market is, our best estimate of what we can achieve is, and this is our commitment of this 80,000 feet, that's commercial. So,
All right, so I want to know about I understand the flex to be that the owner has the right to switch it to their liking, is that correct? So whoever's the owner of that particular storefront can choose to change it over to residential, is that correct?
outside of the town square.
Outside of the town square?
Not for these 5 buildings, and not for these buildings here. The red squares, that's ground floor retail, and the red and candy cane stripe is ground floor commercial, so that could be office or restaurant.
And that's 80,000 square feet of retail on the bottom, correct?
Commercial, yes.
Commercial. So what I'm concerned about here is that the fact that we're not allowing enough growth for the retail and the commercial. So in 10 years from now or 5 years from now, when we know that we have more growth and that we can possibly extend this whole little square out, is that possible?
It is possible. I mean, you see all the time somebody tears down. First of all, you could always go to the extreme and tear down a building and rebuild a building. When you go to higher value, from if you have a viable commercial use versus an existing residential use, for example, commercial use is multiples the value of a residential use, and you see all the time people tearing down a building. Our intent is to construct the buildings so that they could be, so that they have a higher value to whoever buys them, so that they could be along here. We don't see the commercial demand. It might appear as we get going forward, and before the buildings are built, they could be special purpose built as commercial buildings all along Main Street. We're not seeing that in the commercial market right now, and
Right, and that could change, correct?
it will for certain change.
Okay.
Better or worse.
So my concern is that we're not allowing for that growth. I mean, other than tearing down a building. I mean, correct?
You mean we're not just leaving the land vacant for a decade?
No, we're not allowing growth for our town center is kind of what I'm concerned about. Because over time, we're supposed to have a minimum of 250,000 square feet in this whole range. And that's a minimum. So I'm wondering how we're going to get somewhere in the middle.
Well, so that's something I think we've talked to your staff about, and I think I don't want to really address that. That's something that's a town issue on whether you think you have a minimum or not. We've looked at, and the industry looks at commercial spaces, retail sales tax generating space. The hotel is retail sales tax generating space. Portions of BVI, the portions of Cornerstone, in addition to all the other space. And so I'm confident that we will exceed, that Superior Town Center will exceed 250,000 feet of retail sales tax generating space.
So actually, on that, can you tell me how much commercial and retail you have right now as far as either it's a promised, you have it under contract? Are you?
Zero.
Zero, okay.
Well, that's not, I mean,
If
we
you-
have
if you exclude
Golden Valley
Cornerstone
Ice,
and BVI, right?
Cornerstone, those are the first phase.
Well, so technically, as far as a contract, our contracts require our project to get approved. So we don't have any binding contract with anybody. We have a letter of intent with BVI. We have, and then BVI has their agreement with Cornerstone. Cornerstone is part of BVI. So, but those agreements, they have a feasibility period that isn't completed until after the project is approved or hopefully approved. So I'm just being really technical maybe on the contract. We have interest, but just from those two.
But
We
you
have
have-
discussions, we've had discussions with operators who would open a local pub, restaurant, not, we're only focusing on locals, so we've been putting that word out there through the retail chains, and it's been reported in the papers. So we have a number of people that have called us to talk about local restaurants and restaurant concepts, or expanding, maybe having a second or a third venue that they already have.
How about this? So if you total up all the red and the crosshatch and the hotel and whatever's would potentially be in Cornerstone and then BV Ice as retail sales tax generating floor space, what is that number?
That's 444,600 square feet.
So it sounds like we're way over whatever retail sales tax generating square
Yes.
footage would be in the IGA.
Yes.
Okay.
And for example, to address Trustee Williams' comment on not allowing for growth, the hotel side is zoned just hotel. So that's not, that will stay there until we can get a hotel. We're working with the hotel, with a couple of different chains now for something we think would be really special, trying to figure out what incentives we have to provide to get that going sooner than later. And one thing that's not reflected in here is, that will reflect when I probably should have put it in here, but staff had requested and the Planning Commission had requested that the frontage along, the front 300 feet along McCaslin be reserved for office in perpetuity. And so we have agreed to reserve that front space for office. This space over here is sole purposely zoned office. And then we've discussed how the red is purposely zoned residential. The rest is flex, though.
Retail, I think you
Retail.
meant. Red is retail,
Yes.
not residential, yeah.
Pardon me, red is retail, thank you for correcting me. Here, this is the best chance as we get retail tenants on the town square, we're going to build out the town square here with these two buildings and then this building first. This is our best shot at getting a hotel, and we think if we get good restaurant tenants and we start demonstrating the vibrancy that we think we're going to have here, we could have a good shot at getting a boutique hotel right there on Main Street in that location. So on the land use plan, that is zoned. This is just a concept. So this is our concept. We don't want to promise something that we think is completely unrealistic. Our concept shows that this portion of the block is residential. We would, if there's a viable potential commercial use, that value And I'm only talking value in the context that I think it's important to understand that our interests are aligned. You know, we're a commercial enterprise, we're a business, we want to make as much money as possible, we want the project to be successful, we have to balance all those things. If there's a chance we're going to bring in that commercial user, hotel user, the value that they attribute to land is much, much higher than a homeowner. So, yes.
I do think that boutique hotel, if it goes in, and I noticed that you haven't shown it on this map along that L there, that the situation of that boutique hotel there, I hope it works out, because I think it's smart. You know, I think that would be a great place to try to attract a boutique hotel, but
Especially if it has a boutique restaurant, too.
right, and a boutique gift shop right there in the front, too, you know, some nice things like that. I do believe the success of all this will depend on varying heights, et cetera. I think it makes it visually interesting. Having said that, all your red, you've got a huge core of red, all the same heights here. I'm assuming they're going to be inset and articulated and all that kind of stuff to create interest, but it does seem to me like a little much on all the red there. And then down here, this is all the same height down here.
Well, again, those are the same maximum heights.
Right.
Not the same heights. And,
Right. As long as we're clear and in agreement that, in fact, we expect articulation, we expect interesting variation in heights, you know, then...
We're in agreement.
Okay. Now, I know the Planning Commission said office in perpetuity here, but if, in fact, the board has never heard why, and the board has never weighed in on that, I'd be interested in what the logic behind making that in perpetuity. So far, you've sort of convinced me that current economic times require flexibility, so why are we taking that very important entrance there and in perpetuity saying anything about it?
And is it office or is it retail?
It's identified as flex.
Yeah, okay.
And
So it
I
could be
believe the
office or
request,
retail.
my recollection
It's
is...
just not necessarily, I think they just said not residential, right?
Actually, I think that's right. I have to go back and look at my notes.
I think it was
I stand
just- I don't
corrected.
think it's
I've heard
I think that's
office.
what they
I
said.
know that's what he
I've
said, but I
heard
don't think
is
that's what it was.
Yeah, I apologize. There was a point in time when that was the discussion.
So
You're correct.
if it's retail, it's retail or office, the entrances to the buildings are off McCaslin? How will that work off McCaslin?
Well, a McCaslin will be a face, but not an entrance. So the
Okay.
buildings will have to pay attention. They won't turn their back to McCaslin. They would recognize McCaslin as dominant,
Right?
high-traffic corridor where image is really important. It helps establish the identity for the entire town center for the people driving along McCaslin. But the entrance and the access, we would want those people to park in the town center and to be part of the town center environment. There would be no drive access from McCaslin.
Well, this is the first time I've heard the word retail applied to any of that frontage along McCaslin. So I'm interested in hearing what the logic of the Planning Commission was, or what the conversation...
You mean commercial?
I would like to know the background of the conversation about what should face McCaslin, because I feel in the dark about it.
That discussion came after public comment was closed, so that was a discussion among the Planning Commission, and
It was one of staff's recommendations as well.
And I just
wasn't
can't
res-
understand the logic.
That it wasn't residential.
Right,
That's the bottom line, just not res.
Right.
correct. Yeah.
I see Clint here, if he wants to come up and...
Well, let's, before we,
Can he
yeah,
explain that?
it would be
Well-
a little out of the ordinary, but we could certainly do it.
Yeah. I don't understand what's happening there along McCaslin.
I think, the desire is that it's a high-value commercial space and don't want to put a lot of residential next to McCaslin,
Yeah,
presumably.
your
Why would you
commercial
residential
users
there?
want to have the visibility
Visibility.
from the roadway. I mean, as you go down, as you head north on McCaslin into Louisville, there's some residential you can see as you get further north, but in that commercial area, it's all commercial, right on the road there.
And what qualifies as commercial versus retail versus office?
Retail, anything non-residential.
Anything non-
Commercial's typically a business use,
Yeah.
just sort of in the
Vernacular.
planning jargon.
Okay. So, any other questions about it?
Yeah, I do have
I
the height, I'm not sure what's right, 75, 55, 65. I've actually got to go out and feel it and see. Some things that come to mind, I am concerned if the town square is the prevailing idea, and I'm not even allowing that, but it's on there right now, I want to make sure that what happens around the town square does not create, it's not bounded by these tall buildings and thus create some even smaller looking and smaller feeling entity just because of the sheer height that's surrounding it. I'm seeing across from town square, you've got 3-foot, three-story max property. I don't care about that, Randy. I know your point on that. We're way beyond that. Here, you've got a 3-story building on the other side of the square. Tell me the logic of that.
That primarily goes to the shade analysis and making sure that a large portion of the town square is not in the shade on December 21st.
Okay. And you've apparently identified that the westernmost corner of the square as max of 5-story height?
That's the max 75 feet.
And so it seems
Just
to
for an
me,
architectural feature,
will that be an active building, or will it be an architectural feature? Or both?
probably both.
Okay.
Probably both. Our overall concept is to have legitimacy in the architecture and the design, so that we don't have significant architectural features that are faux or fake.
Right.
But that could be a penthouse, it could be an office overlooking the town square. Something, it'll be more distinguishable from the 36. It'll be just something peeking out, saying, look over here. There's something special going on.
Trustee Skumatz?
The reason I wanted to see a 75 building around here is because it's hard for me to get a sense of scale. And I think the reason that 75-foot building in Boulder works is because it doesn't just go up 75 feet, it goes back to get that tall. So that's a big difference in how it looks as opposed to a canyon versus this reaching out thing. What do you envision down there in the 75-foot buildings?
We envision a step back situation where it would take advantage of a patio. And in the architecture, let me see if I have the plan of our town center, but of the town square, just sort of the concept plan, we had that building at the 4th and 5th story, they step back. Now the concept is to take 2/3 of that building on the east side and to step it back. So that was that building that you were looking at, and I'll pull it up, but then just to get rid of the top floor so that just one piece is popping up because of the reaction that
Thanks.
was provided.
I understand.
Okay, so I'd like to walk through block by block mostly here, so sorry about this, but so at block 16 on the building mass diagram, which is, I think, listed as the potential pre-K site. So that's So I'm starting from the south going north. So just it's chopped off as blue and purple, and I can't imagine the pre-K site's going to be a 3-story building, so we could probably just make that blue.
Yeah, and we have, we'll need to meet with and have discussions with Boulder Valley School District on their heights and what they're envisioning.
I know of no BBSD building that's more than 2 stories.
Okay.
So
So
I
you
can't
would-
think of any. Maybe Casey is, I'm not sure.
Okay, so
Jim.
that building would be in the 32-foot height limit?
Mhm.
Is that your recommendation?
That would be my recommendation. And that potentially then blocks, so the things around the town green I would not want very tall, so that would be 14 and 18.
So we have that,
You have that as 55 feet.
okay, so we have that live-work focus in the area in blue.
Mhm.
Would you like to have that step back to,
Neighborhood scale type of retail, I mean, I can't imagine that the red building potentially would be 3 stories commercial in the middle of a residential area. But one, I have no idea how that little red dot, you said you were optimist? I appreciate optimism, it's fantastic. I can't see how that's going to be commercially viable, but if you think if it is, great, so.
Andrew, where are you talking?
that is a challenging site to
Off of
get a
Street,
restaurant there.
Street 4.
I think of in Prospect, they have with the Rib House. Are you familiar? You're familiar with Prospect up in Longmont? They have the Andreas Duani, Elizabeth Platter-Zyberg designed community. They have the Rib House back in there. So, but you're right, fatal optimist. So
There you go. So the things around there, though, I prefer to see, if block, 18, I guess it is, needs to be 3 stories, fine. But the things, especially, so what I'm thinking is 14, 16.
Can you possibly have
Yeah, I'm
the
sorry.
correct map so that Andrew can point to where he's talking about?
I wish my laser accuracy was.
That's
gonna
why
be
we gave
good,
you that.
So I don't think I can hold it still enough to really.
I know, I can't,
To
so.
that one little area. I don't think that I can do that, so.
Maybe Randy
You know,
can.
we're okay with that, though, to be
So,
honest.
yeah, I
Go
don't think
ahead.
I could do that, so, but, so like 14,
This one,
click, yep, 16,
this one,
yep. Those would be
and
all.
this one, 15.
Yeah, potentially, I'd be more open to that being a little taller, but the 14, 15, and probably then whatever that is across 19, maybe? No, down
that
south.
was 15, 16?
Yeah, there.
Oh,
That's-
19, okay.
Yeah, those being in the, up to, we can talk about heights, but, 32 feet or something like that. That would feel a little better about that one.
And what's the logic, Andrew?
Just that it's a transition from higher intensity, lower intensity Rock Creek Ranch subdivision into something that it would be a transition where things become more and more intense as you go north. So, I think that the grade here is to the point that the roof line is, I suspect, is going to be below where most of Rock Creek Ranch is, because I think in this area, it all goes downhill. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but I think that's kind of where we're at here.
And that's consistent with our grading concept, too.
So, and then in the core, I appreciate the up to 4 stories, but we need some sort of language where there are varying heights within the core, 2 to 4 feet. Not addressing the orange stuff right yet, but that, because otherwise, if somebody looks at this and buys, land from this and say, well, look here, it said I get 4 feet, 4 stories or whatever it is, I get
We're just focusing
I
on
got 65 feet.
maximum building heights.
Right, so I totally get the max, but we need to have some language in there that doesn't mean every building is going to be 4 stories and/or 65 feet. So do you have a way that
Well, why
we
don't
could
we
get around
introduce
that?
that into the architectural, into Chapter 8, into the architectural
Okay.
guidelines?
Okay.
So that we have building articulation.
Sure, trustees' comments?
And if there's a way to say also that it can't be that height right at the street, at the front of the street, that would be great too. That it's
And then
graduates too.
I'm flexible, and I could give you 5 stories and a quarter of the block on the plaza if you absolutely felt like you had that little. I'd like to use the pointer again, but I won't be able to get.
This one here?
Yeah, thank you. And that the other orange to the east, that little L orange,
Block 7?
yeah,
The
right.
7.
That if it were to become a hotel, then it could go up to 5 feet, and if it weren't going to be a hotel, then it would have to be maximum of the 4 feet, 4 stories, sorry. 4 feet would be very small.
Yeah.
Little durable kind of thing going on. Yeah, 4-story, and once again, I'm just going to talk stories. I appreciate the height limit here, so I'm making them the same, so. So I think that's all I had about that. Does that sound like a reasonable approach to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, can I have one comment?
Yes.
You were talking about the guidelines versus the PUD.
Yes.
Actual restrictions, and then, so we're talking about putting, heights varying in the guidelines.
Mhm.
Right now, my understanding is those are guidelines.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't necessarily require that the buildings not all be 65 feet. If you want to have some kind of actual variance requirement, it needs to go into the PUD itself. And I could put that on developer here just to suggest language.
Okay.
that we might be able to
And we
put
could
into the PUD.
Yeah, so you can either do that tonight, or you guys can work that. You get the concept that I'm interested in.
Right.
You guys do whatever that is that you do.
Got it.
Okay? Is that fair? Okay.
Yes.
And then when we get to the hotel, to the 90-foot, so when, I think the board expressed, I expressed, and I think the board was interested, what a photo sim of that would look like, not with architectural renderings, but what would that look like from the highway? Do you have a kind of a timeline when you could get that to us?
I will, I can get that to you next Monday.
Okay, that would be great.
I'll do my best to get it to you next Monday.
That's fair enough. Once
Will we
again,
have
this is.
time to talk about it next Monday?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why we could. So.
I thought it was going to look like the St. Julian.
Yeah, well, that's what I was presuming as well, especially since I think I saw the St. Julian again on one of what Alex presented. So I said, oh, I know that hotel. So, but you get my meaning. So, and the meaning is that if we don't want something very tall right next to the highway, that is then going to look like you can't see anything past it. It's going to look like a barricade wall. That there's important view corridors in there that look towards the Flatirons that make this property very valuable, and we don't want to prevent that from the motorists as they go by saying that, there's something interesting going on there, and look how lovely it is to the west, and I bet I could, if I went there and bought something, I could see something there. We don't want that to be a barrier to that concept, so.
So I'll provide some imagery on that, and just in the interim, we're focusing on the hotel envelope being right in here.
And that would be my guess of what you do, that you move it a little bit away, and then the orientation of the hotel would be maybe diagonal or whatever, but.
Our hope is for the massing to appear on Marshall Road. As you enter, Marshall Road becomes an important road with an important building. When you're sitting here at the intersection, we want you to look ahead and say, wow, what's going on over here?
Okay.
And so that, by necessity, pulls it away from the 36, and there's also higher noise levels right on the 36.
Okay. Great. And then you provided, I think, is this from tonight, or is this was in my packet?
Can I ask
Oh, yeah.
any remaining questions about
Yes,
that?
of course.
I actually like your point, Andrew, about not creating a 90-foot barricade wall. I can see that hotel of varying heights that actually allow see-throughs.
I assume that that's what
whatever.
you'd do, that you'd have
But,
a step.
In the central core, where you said only make that hotel 5 stories, should it be a hotel, I actually am looking for the height in the center of the core around the square to actually be visually higher. I'm looking for that to be the highest point in the whole town center. And I thought we had talked about that, Randy, that the highest point of the town center core would be around the square, so as to draw your attention to the central point of that core. So if you
That's
move,
why they-
if you move that upward, that diagram up there, upward so we can see the square. If in fact, yeah, just a little bit more, yeah. There you go. If we lose the hotel as the 75-foot max height, let's say that doesn't come in and so we have to drop it down to the red color. In fact, we've lost the visual height there of making that the tallest part, except for your little square there on the town square.
No, because most of it will be 2 and 3 stories with some four-story buildings.
Well, I'm just telling you my preference is to have the eye of the consumer go towards that central core. So,
I'm just not excited about 5 stories of
yeah, that can
residential.
be accomplished in many ways. So I don't want to give up we don't need a whole L-shaped big hotel spanning 2 city blocks at that, but I think I'm not going to preclude the idea that if plan comes through later that has a little bit more than that, being 75 feet, to draw your attention to the town square. I don't want to preclude some interest at
Then
the
if
town
we don't
square.
say that it's a boutique hotel, since that probably doesn't have any particular legal meaning, that it would have to be a commercial building. So if it was office or whatever, but 5 stories of residential, I'm not
Yeah, I don't see
about.
the necessity for the whole L-shaped thing to be 75 feet, but there can be elements that would go up to 75 feet of whatever it was. Let's say it finished out at 65 feet, but it had some visual height that was interesting that still, at the corners, that still pulled my eye at some points to 75 feet. I don't want to preclude that possibility, because I do think there's something about drawing the attention of the consumer towards the center.
Fair
point
enough,
of
but I think
square.
that what I heard in terms of your desire, and I share the same thing. I am not a big fan of gluing things onto buildings that have no functionality. I mean, some of them has to have architectural interest, yeah, totally get that. But spires and this, that, and the other thing stuck onto a building, I'm not interested. So I think that what would happen if this was 5 stories, 75 feet, it would be 5 stories.
No,
So
I'm just not wanting to preclude. My more important point here was we've never yet discussed solar orientation. The original plan had the buildings facing north and south, as I understood it. As I understand your plan, the buildings are facing east and west. And Lisa's the solar guru here, so I'm going to have to defer to her. But I have a west-facing house, and with my backyard facing west in the evening, and it renders my whole backside unusable in the evening, and my whole front side unusable in the morning. So I would never buy another house that was oriented in that direction. And it seems to me like we've reconfigured this whole design to face those directions. So I'd like you to address that.
Well, we believe we can accommodate the solar needs with when we come forward with future architecture. We've reoriented blocks. Generally, yes, the blocks have a different dimension. We haven't presented architecture. We absolutely we think the consumers, strongly desire solar options. And so when we come forward with architecture and final development plans, we're confident we can accommodate the solar need. But there'll be a little bit of a tension there in that we don't want all the rooftops lined up in a row. but nonetheless, we can accommodate the solar need and not have the rooftops totally lined up. I don't doubt that at all.
I think she's not just
Solar
talking solar
guru.
power. I think she's talking the fact that
No,
when you
but-
have windows along a side that faces too much sun, it's impossibly hot in the room and that sort of stuff. Not just solar power. I have some of the same issues with you. I've got big black stuff on because I can't use the room otherwise.
That's why I put a appropriately positioned awning in those locations, if they're permanent, so that when the angle of the sun goes down, you get the solar gain, and when it's in the summertime, you don't.
We absolutely will accommodate that when we come forward with architecture and plans for buildings.
And honestly, from my perspective, driving around Sagamore and even in my neighborhood, the things that face, the driveways or the face of a house that faces north is ice all winter long. So actually having a different orientation where both sides of the street would get would get sunshine and melting would be beneficial. So actually, I think this is a better orientation from my perspective.
I see.
Did I hear you
Trustee
say
Hensel.
that L-shaped portion, though, as long as it wasn't residential, then you'd be fine if it was 5 feet or 75 feet?
Personally be open to it if it wasn't 5 stories of residential.
I would agree. If it was just residential, I would not be too keen on it being 75 feet. But if it is going to be residential and then commercial or all commercial, that I could see the flexibility being useful.
We're absolutely on the same wavelength here. We agree, so we'll make it variable.
Okay. So then did you want to go through this map? I'm not sure. This was generated for, just to go over what open space was, or?
It was a request of staff.
Okay. Staff?
This one, Andrew?
With all the scallops.
Yeah, the green.
Because it's not actual.
It's not the same.
I know.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah, but the scallops, right?
it's nice. I appreciate how it connects to Discovery Parkway
Yes.
here in this plan, so.
And I don't have that in front of me right now.
Here you go, Ryan. Thank you.
But assuming it's
Updated.
the updated plan with this as general. Why don't, what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple minutes break, just so people can stretch their legs and you can locate the exhibit. Does that sound fair?
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
This morning. I think it was Friday. Actually, I think it was Friday. It was the first one that I sent you. With this break, I should be able to find it here. Break. Great. 6,
So we're waiting, but question for staff. So the land use summary spreadsheet on the big document, assume that will all be updated,
Yeah,
reflective of what's,
Yeah, we'll have to go through and
Yeah.
update that. And send the blocks on these different blocks, make sure all those are.
I'll email it to them.
yeah.
Yeah, in one email. Yes, I'm sorry about that. I'll just implement it on thumb drive.
Because I have just one, but. Did that.
Should I just send this to Lisa? I'll just put it on the thumb drive. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, she's so that's fine. I got this. I'll just send it to Jim right now.
How's the Chevy Volt?
Haven't been asked. Actually, it was funny because Friday we were leaving and it was around. He said, come back in.
It is stuff in here.
And he said, we wanted to hook up. So I've seen so many. Just no,
Have we agreed to a closing time tonight?
It says 11 on the thing.
Good.
I'm hoping before then.
I have 4 things I have to get done before people go into the office in the morning. I have 4 things I have to get done.
You need a chair now, or is it?
The file is called alternate 2.
I like your ball. I didn't know that you were singing on
It's called alternate 2 dash overall.
Once you started bouncing in my peripheral vision, I'm like,
You've tested it out all the time beforehand.
I do all in every room. I do 1 day a week.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, at every desk in my house. That's
So
a
it forces you to have good posture?
It forces your legs to move
Oh,
too.
the floor, right?
Yeah.
I should try that.
1 day a week. It's hard, you know, kids get up. Yeah. It's hard to be balanced, right? That's a good thing.
That's exactly. It forces you to balance instead of the thumb of my legs. It forces me to balance. Have you had a problem?
You know, I've got lower back pain that I just can't get rid of.
Pain?
So I'm thinking if it's for development, that's going to help.
Yeah.
we can all do it.
Yeah, I often that we all.
You know, it's like when you shave your head in sympathy.
Yeah. We should all get these because I don't know how to work them.
We can get on the ball.
Those things?
And by the way,
Seriously,
Sandy, I think I know
very
what your
talented
backside would be.
Yeah, that was it is.
I said if your backside is not useful or something like that.
Like these things.
You're doing very well.
Not really. Because I am very frustrated. I have a lot to say, but obviously.
I didn't hear any of that. I don't think I want to.
No,
you said it.
So prepared. You don't want to listen. And please come on.
I don't want to.
Be dedicated to the town and, you know, we would be going through a process on how we want to plan those areas as we move forward, so.
Okay.
Unless we knew right away, then we could include those in the plan.
So this brings me to a question, which is how much of the field's play space area is in the floodplain? Is everything on the creek in the floodplain? And
Apparently, almost all of it.
so that's in the 100-year flood, none of it's in the floodway presumably?
Not in the floodway. The floodplain extends out to about here. Okay, kind of jigs and jags a little bit, but the current 100-year floodplain extends here, and then with our grading, it will be moved back.
Okay, so that you'll,
Actually, I need to correct it.
Okay.
Because, no, this is Jim Brostovich with Civil Resources. Some of the floodway is, some of the fields are in the floodway. Floodway line is somewhere in here.
and would they be regraded? So, because if they're in the floodway, that's what?
You can't really regrade. In the floodway.
In the floodway, you can't do
it's
much.
difficult for us to raise it.
So just as, so floodway sort of 5-year flooding sort of timeline, right?
Not necessarily. That's just has to do with how much you can encroach without increasing the flood elevation a certain amount.
But the floodway, so in general parlance, at least for my job, the floodway is 100-year floodplain. Is that?
No, the floodplain is wider than the floodway. The floodway is if you take the floodplain and filled it in, a lot of times they'll have, if you fill it in so much, it'll raise the floodplain elevation half a foot or 1 foot, depending on jurisdiction. So the
So can
5-year.
you, do you have a map of where that is vis-a-vis this design?
It's probably on here very faintly.
Okay.
This is probably the floodway line with a very faint gray line here. So I don't have a complete mapping of, say, the 5-year, but I did model it. It was part of the earlier iteration. And you know, these bridges we had basically spanned the 5-year. The pedestrian bridges, the 5-year flood is not very wide.
Okay.
On Coal Creek. In fact, it'll vary depending where it is.
So you don't have a crystal ball. Nobody can say this. Okay, so I'll give you that. But how often would the dark green be underwater?
Maybe a 10-year, but that's something that could easily be studied. When we do the floodplain study, we can study that, but I mean, I'm guessing 10, maybe to 25. It's hard to say without.
That would be good to know, because if it's every rain, if it's with every rain, it's unplayable, unusable. Obviously, that doesn't work.
It wouldn't be ever. Based on what I did model previously for the 5-year, because we wanted those pedestrian bridges to span the 5-year event. The pedestrian bridges were only 100 or so feet long. So if you envision a 100-foot wide swath.
Okay. So if, next time this comes around, maybe at that next meeting, can you just show that? Because once again, if we have fields, we want to be able to plan on them, and we understand that during extraordinary circumstances, they're not going to be playable, but we want them, 99 cases out of 100 that they'll be playable and not underwater.
What we could do is an approximate, I mean, a full detailed study like that is a month's worth of work, but we could do an approximate.
I would give you the liberty of just sketching it out to the best of your approximation. So.
Yes, Monday.
Okay.
So why is Town Hall not on here? In terms of, this is dedicated town space, right?
Well, just the
fields.
Parks and
Okay.
open space.
So just point to the other town properties.
There.
That's on,
Right.
it's easier to see on this one. I
And
think.
the footnotes, really, the legend is really hard to read at this scale, so I'll just read to you the green. The evergreen is developed parkland, and the yellowish green is naturalized landscape / open space. So we didn't put the parcels, other parcels on there, the town hall parcel.
Thanks.
So is now the time to ask, if I have a question about that Marshall Bridge, is now a time to get to it?
Yeah, that would be certainly.
So
So that would be reasonable.
what does how's that going to look? My concern is, does it split the Coal Creek corridor in half visually? Or is it going to be elevated enough that visually the Coal Creek corridor stays intact and is usable as one element?
As it is today?
Right.
Well, the Coal Creek pathway would pass, there'd be plenty of room that would pass underneath the Marshall Bridge. And so I would say it would stay intact beyond what you use today.
Do we have an idea how wide the opening it would be here? Jim?
That, probably about 100 feet is what the waterway opening needs to be, between 80 and 100 feet. Whether it's a bridge or a combination of culverts, it's about...
Does that include the width of Coal Creek?
That would, yes.
So what is the width of that is over land?
You mean
Well, Coal Creek itself, as you know, you can step across it in a lot
Right.
of seasons.
Right.
So it's kind of the lowest point in the floodplain is where that would be. And there might be, I mean, we haven't designed that structure, but what it does contemplate on this plan is potentially a separate structure for the Coal Creek Trail, depending on, because the trail is so much higher, we wouldn't want to have the whole structure have to be that tall.
Right.
We want to start coming down as soon as we go over the Coal Creek path.
Trustee Skumatz.
But I heard the word culvert. Are you saying you're not saying you're going to put the creek into a culvert?
Well, no. In a lot of the Rock Creek, a lot of the creeks here have multi-cell culverts, big boxes.
I understand.
The advantage of a culvert here is that you have multiple spans and you don't need as much structure thickness, which would tend to lower the road and visually make it not look quite as much like a dike. So if you put a bridge in, say the bridge structure might need to be 5 feet thick, which makes the road 5 feet higher. On a culvert, you may only need it to be 2 feet thick, so the road can be lower, the embankment is narrower.
But you don't call attention to the fact that you're going over a creek or a water thing. You're almost burying that fact.
Oh, no. You can still have parapets, like the one on Rock Creek Parkway, where it goes over Rock Creek. Has parapets, it has the architectural elements. But instead of a single span bridge, it's a 3-span culvert.
So I guess the net point here is that how that is treated is important to me, in that I think you've gotten from me that I consider Coal Creek a major element of this town center, and the way in which the bridge is handled. And I'm glad to hear there are not going to be dikes, because that visually would separate it into 2 elements for me that are disconnected. So I would like to, at the soonest convenience, see some 3D or whatever the appropriate name is, side views, so we can get an idea of what that's going to look like.
But you're not anticipating it being culverts there. You're thinking a natural bridge.
Well, he just told me I can walk over it, so I don't see the need for the culverts, but I'm not a civil engineer, so I'm not a lover of the, whatever you just said, the culvert approach. But I have to weigh the balance as to what that means to the rest of the design. So we need to see alternatives and tell you which one we would prefer.
Sandy, we had that conversation about
Second Street, yeah, I
down here,
know.
yeah, and I think that the entire board wasn't too hip on.
But that's wider there, isn't it? Is this the same width as at Second?
Actually, this structure will probably need to be wider than the Second Street
Ah,
structure.
Well,
because we're not.
we may have our answer ready because we were not fans.
Because we're not replacing an existing structure. Whenever you put a new structure in, by definition, you're going to raise the water surface upstream of it. If you're just replacing something that was there or something that's already constricted, you don't have as much sensitivity to.
I'm feeling dense, I'm not really getting what you're saying, but oh well. I don't get why it has to be, why we.
I think the takeaway is that it would be wider than at Second. And if we don't
The
like box
replacement
culverts.
versus the other thing,
yeah.
why that makes a difference, but oh well.
Trustee Williams.
But I did have a question about the path.
So I'm just thinking if I can't beat them, I can join them here. How, we're going to go this detail-oriented. I'm trying to get dialed down here. So as far as the creek, what are the, sorry, I'm trying to think of the word, how much embankment are we preserving on both sides, and what kind of
Manicured versus natural, that kind of thing?
No, I just want to know what kind of preservation do we have on both sides?
I may defer that question to Paul.
Timing is everything.
The question is, what do we put along 12th Street beyond the bridges? So, we have the right area corridor.
So the question is, what happens to this Paul Q and MIG Winston? So what happens to the Coal Creek corridor on either side of the bridges? Is that the question?
Correct. What's the buffer that you're protecting, and how much of it?
The tree line, as it stands today, is basically left intact. And the intent would be, the recommendations from the previous environmental plans would be that there would be an ongoing restoration of that corridor to improve the habitat and get rid of the invasive species like crack willows and things like that. And that's my understanding of the intent at this point in time.
So is it 30 feet, 50 feet? I mean, how much on each side are we talking?
In many cases, it varies with the use that's adjacent to it, where we have the, excuse me, where we have the multi-purpose field here, it comes up very close to the edge. This is an area where it's more naturalized. It's still developed parkland, but it once again would stop at the tree line. So it varies from location to location. It's not continuous. Again, if that would be a requirement, I guess we'd have to look at that as an idea.
I know we've looked at this before. We looked at 30 feet, we looked at 50 feet from the embankment or from center of the creek, and I'm just curious as to where you guys are going with that.
Well, the tree line, the tree canopy extends far beyond the banks of the creek. We stayed well out of that. If you can see this serrated line here, that represents the tree canopy, and the creek corridor, as you can see in here, is a considerable distance from the edges of that. As a matter of fact, this double line through here is the creek, and you can see, let's see if I'm trying to find something to scale, it's at least a couple of 100 feet away.
Okay.
Trustees Kumats?
And so you can't walk under the bridge along the creek? Is that what you were saying also?
No, there is a pedestrian, well, there's the existing Coal Creek Trail would go underneath, there would be underneath underpass crossing right at this location. That would allow you to get under the bridge,
But separate from the creek.
separate from the creek as is planned now. Is that correct, Jim, that it would be separate?
Well, that's one concept here. Again, there's a huge amount of design that needs to go into how that structure works, but that is one concept that would allow us the lowest profile of Marshall Road and therefore the least embankment width.
But I thought you just said 100 feet. What was that all about?
Well, 100 feet would be the span, from end to end as you're driving across the structure, 100 feet.
No, I expressly asked the question underneath the road.
Right.
How much walking space and how contiguous will the creek be underneath
Maybe I
that
misunderstood.
bridge?
So, this structure here, from a flood standpoint, does not need to be very tall. So this structure here wouldn't necessarily be more than 6 or 8 feet high, unless you deliberately wanted it to be higher.
So my question is going back to, are we going to functionally split Coal Creek into two halves? So if I'm on one half, if I'm on the west half, let's say I came up Avenue A and walked into, on the edge of the natural, can I just meander over to the playing fields and to the east edge? Or is that going to be cut off by the Marshall bisect?
The way this is currently drawn is you'd have to cross on the bridge that's here to get to here, to this side.
And so visually, it's going to be cut off too. So it is going to be two halves, is what I'm now interpreting you as saying.
The way this is currently drawn, it would be. We could make this bridge high enough to walk under.
That's what I thought you had said
That would raise
earlier.
the entire road and make the dike higher. Every foot you bring it up makes it 6 or 8 feet wider at the bottom. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah. Well, goes back to, there are people who like this bisect, and there are people who suggest that it should be on the east edge, that Marshall should be on the east edge. And I'm just wanting to make sure we fully understand that if we accept this bisect through the middle, that we're basically cutting the Coal Creek corridor into two parts. That is very important to me.
And what I was trying to make the point was that it's worth it to me to have the bridge be higher so that we can walk under it and be one with the creek. So,
Okay. Let's see, now, at last meeting, there was some discussion about presenting building precedents. Was that going to come tonight, or was that coming at a different meeting?
We can have that ready by Monday. We've been working on that and don't have that ready for tonight.
Okay. I don't think I have anything else then. Other questions from the board?
Were we going to make our way through the rest of this?
We stopped at Appendix B, so there's just 2 pages.
Yeah, it seems like most of it was,
And then
most of it was maps, right? And then a lot of this is going to be altered, so yes, if people have some other thoughts, we could just go through the pages if you like. I think we went through colors last go around, right? Here. Why don't we just do this? So let me get to went through landscaping, went through architectural color palette and architectural materials and streetscape materials, right? So where I thought we ended up was figure A, right?
Oh, okay.
So, and I think we just talked a whole bunch about that, so I didn't have anything else about that one. Trustee Pennington?
Randy, I'm interested in where Ranch Capital will bear the responsibility for tree placement and for landscape. I think at one point you said there were going to be trees up Avenue B.
It'll be on the PD landscape
Right.
plan,
Okay.
which I think,
Have you put those plans together yet for what the developer responsibility is for any landscape or trees?
Our responsibility is for the full construction of the public right-of-way for all the public roads. We would also have the responsibility for the landscaping on the private property. So all the public right-of-way would include, as when your staff showed you the right-of-way and distinguished the right-of-way from the travel lanes, the remainder is the landscape and the sidewalk. So we're responsible for all of the landscaping.
I'd just like to see it depicted on, as we have depicted everything else here, I'd like to see that which you're responsible for.
Okay, if we don't have one, we'll provide a landscaping
So
exhibit.
L1, got one in their PD plans.
The big sheets we have?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Anybody?
L 1.0. It has landscape densities and, which didn't change from the approved PD from last year. That's the exact same landscape densities and species.
The reason I'm asking is when I made my tour of various neighborhoods around the metro region last week, it made a huge amount of difference in creating a sense of place, whether or not there was uniformity in tree plantings down certain streets, et cetera. And I would say it was quite nice. And so I'll take a look at L1 when I get back to my house and look that all over. But some neighborhoods even had the front of the homes all planted lushly in landscape, and it had to be done by the builder, et cetera, because it would never have occurred that uniformly with individual homeowners doing it. So I'll look at it and bring it back up next week.
okay. So that was figure A. I think we talked about figure B, figure C. I think we saw a lot of that with Alex. C2. And then figure D.
Can I ask a question about figure D?
Yeah.
Randy, those on the town square site plan in the lower left corner, is that building there on the left half, is that permanent or is that movable?
Our idea for that building was that it's a permanent building that would be ideally suited for a restaurant that would have evening entertainment. It's separated from the other buildings. There's nothing on a second floor or third floor above. It's sort of on one end of the town square. Would you like me to pull up an exhibit?
Yeah, would you mind, because there's a whole bunch of buildings here, so. Is that right now?
the other, well, this is probably still loaded. Oh, no, that's here.
So while you're looking for that, at the next meeting, in addition, will Boulder Valley School District, will it wade in yet, or do you have a timeline from them?
We haven't heard from them. They're still working on, we know August. At
Okay.
the latest, by the August meeting, but
All right, and Louisville will have some sketch of what they were contemplating for Campus Drive.
actually Alex is going to put something together for us.
Okay. And you'll have Alex will tell us that if we close the town center core, the traffic will
He's
work.
working on that currently, yeah.
So will that be at the next meeting, or
It
just?
will not.
Okay.
Finish out that last idea, though. If we close down,
If the town square site core becomes, if the restaurant's there or whatever, just becomes the total cat's meow and everybody knows where they're there, if it got to that point, could we close it, the street, and make sure that permanently make sure the traffic works?
right. And is that, the question on that is, PV ICE is making a substantial investment in their entity as well as Cornerstone. How do they feel, Randy, about, have you floated past Boulder Valley Ice and Cornerstone the possibility that the main drag that would originally feed their properties might at some point be permanently closed down, and what's their response to that?
We certainly should ask them, but my ICE is a destination, so people will find it, and so I don't think that they really care much, but it's not a drive-by.
Yeah, I would like to have them asked.
Sure.
Because if I were putting that much money in infrastructure, I'm not sure I would like my primary access changed once user patterns were established as to how to get there. So it's just something I'd be interested in knowing how they felt.
Okay, I'll ask them.
Just for quickness, this is why I'm referring to this little drawing here and this entity right here.
So the light-colored structures there?
Right. Some people thought that was temporary and could be moved
Right.
if we wanted the whole square at our disposal.
That's what we heard. Right?
And I thought I heard Randy say that the intent is for it to be permanent.
Yeah, I got the feeling that they're trying to just build a there. No? That would be permanent, nice restaurant, but this here would be something that could be permanent.
Well, I'm open to, well, that's something that we take advice from the board. It seems like the computer is frozen, but the buildings that you're asking about are the two buildings that are on the west end of the town square.
Right.
Those were envisioned as the building that would accommodate evening entertainment and even afternoon entertainment with second floor dining overlooking the town square. And for entertainment, you typically want a building to be separate from evening uses, particularly residential. And so we put the as far as responding to some people in town, a lot of people have expressed a need for a place for some sort of evening entertainment venue. And so that is our recommendation as to where that would be located so that it can integrate with the town square, activate the town square at night. There could be live music, and it's not going to reverberate through a building. There's no residential above. It's a freestanding restaurant location that turns into nighttime entertainment.
But it would be a permanent structure.
It would, that's the way we've conceptualized it, as a permanent structure.
So while you're looking also then, would there be any interest in shrinking a little bit of the town square site on the north end and putting a little bit of it on the south end? I'm not wedded to that, but if it got to the point that you close the block, because what you're going to build is going to be so fantastic, and everybody from miles and miles around are going to want to come here, whether or not it would make sense to have a little bit more of the plaza feeling on the south side, which is going to be hard to demonstrate
It
since...
doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it
Okay.
doesn't make sense to our professional team. I think we have a very, very large square relative to the population.
No, I'm not saying that the square is going to get, I don't think that, I wasn't suggesting to add more.
You mean his trail road more?
I was just going to, right, so it'd be a little bit on both sides.
Oh, well,
So if that doesn't work for your design,
this
just ask it.
particular feature is designed to maximize the sunlight on December 21st, and so that goes in hand with having the lowest building opposing the town square, and then
Fair enough.
the large town square with those buildings set back is to try to maximize the use year-round.
Okay, that's fine. So, let's see, can you go back one slide, I think? Oh, no, it's forward one slide, just to get to D. Maybe,
That's freezing.
or maybe that one's frozen. All right, well, I think that we heard what you're suggesting, is that this is going to be permanent buildings.
That's our recommendation. We're, like anything else, on
Don't
a
care.
discrete basis, tell us.
When it comes to the FDP, we can talk about it from my perspective. I think that's getting into a little...
Right. As far as having an indie
Managing at the
entertainment
moment.
venue, we think it's a great location. It can really help activate the town square, and it can also be used to help homestead events. So when you have a major event, you want a restaurant that will participate, that has a restaurant facility and restrooms and things like that. So being there on the town square, that facility, again, a reason why we go after local sole proprietor businesses, so they're really engaged with the community and they're involved with those types of activities. These types of freestanding buildings in the middle of squares are very common in large squares.
Don't care. Does anybody
I'd
have
like
strong
to-
feelings about it? Trustee Pennington?
I'd like to repeat the request I made last week. If somebody could accommodate me by next Monday, I wanted to have, like Alex presented, actual roads in the widths we're considering. I would like to see actual square built out like this similarly, that has 3 streets on the outside edges. I'd like to just see how it actually functions in reality. I'm still not a convert to this idea, and so I'd like to have, certainly, this isn't the only one out there, so if anybody has any idea of,
Seattle has one, and it has the floating buildings like that, too. There's a coffee shop that's one of these
okay.
floating buildings.
Yeah, if we can call it up on Google Earth, or we can get a picture off the chamber website or something, that we can actually see one of these in reality, or several.
Can we get a
I'd
fish
like
market,
to see them.
Yeah.
And I cannot visualize how big this is at all. And the only thing I can put it against is a football field. So if you overlaid this on a football field, for me, that would be terrific too, so I can see relative size.
Well, does it help to compare it to the oval that you had previously?
It may help other people, it doesn't help me.
Have you been to Belmar?
No.
So it's a little bit bigger than the square in Belmar.
Okay. Anything else with figure D? And then figure E1 is changed, and basically you presented we just talked about that. Same thing with E2, right? It's the same sort of open space diagram that we just talked about. unless I'm missing something. And then F,
There's a good example of the path that Sandy was referring to at the north end of the town, where you can walk out through the open space and hook up to the path that goes under the bridge of Marshall Road. And then what is that underpass there? Is that?
that's the existing.
That's the
now?
existing underpass.
That's a Coal Creek, that's right.
Yeah, underneath the highway. So I don't think I have any, anybody have any thoughts about this at all? Okay. And then you're going to bring the precedents, so that's G1 and G2 are coming at the next meeting. Correct. And then I think we talked about this in the body of the architectural document, so
But this is all going to change.
G3.
On G3, because all this references 4- and 5-story buildings.
Yeah, so this will be, there's, a whole bunch of things in the documents and on the PD that'll have to change based upon what comments, so. And then, I think, is this G4? Is that, I think a couple of my pages left, so I might be missing one. So, I don't think I don't have anything on this. And in terms of the big PD map, I think that we've addressed everything in there essentially. Someplace else, so I didn't have anything. So, Matt, did you have anything in particular?
Can I ask a question while Fred's
Yep.
gathering his thoughts? The Coal Creek connection that, Randy, you drew on there, I want to just throw this open to Matt or whoever can answer it. Does that all presumes the going over Anderson, right?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Yep.
okay.
There's no other way to make
Okay.
it.
Yes, it does.
Are you able to speak to whether or not you have a good working relationship with the Anderson property?
I haven't talked with the Anderson property owners. So we don't know.
Town staff have
I
good
do
working
speak to-
relationship with the Anderson property?
Yes, we speak to them a couple times a month.
And, are we hopeful?
Yeah, because, they're interested in developing their property or selling it. We've had discussions on different prices over the years. And I'd have to reach out to them again to see, what their latest price is.
It would be great if there'd be some way to coordinate something with them as part of this process. If Campus Drive goes through, I wonder how much utility there may be. I'm just thinking out loud here, not saying anything one way or the other, but
I think it would behoove you to take Randy with you. Just an idea.
okay. All right, Fred.
This is Fred Fox, consulting town planner. Myself and the rest of the staff have talked about, a little bit about the land use plan, and what I'm looking at is, what I've made notes on is similar to the one that you have here. But we had a few suggestions, and so I guess the idea is to throw those out. Block 1. Where's the pointer? Right here. Okay. Block 1 is here. That one is identified, at least on the map that I'm looking at, which is an iteration before the one we got tonight. But anyway, my notes are on here. Is that we will think that block ought to be, instead of just identified as an office use, then it ought to have some flex space. It should be a flex office building. So there's, the whole idea of this thing is be a little bit more flexible, so then when you see something that's identified in a location like that, it probably ought to be flexible.
Okay.
In terms of the use, so we would suggest that.
And in that area, just,
That's right up here.
so there will be some entrance monumentation.
One would assume.
Yeah, that area there on both corners, and then possibly something with that detention facility there.
Okay. We wouldn't want to drive a restaurant as being probably the gateway to Boulder County, so just so that we're cognizant of that.
I think the connections off-site, we were discussing earlier, the Discovery Office Park and dealing with issues that connect this development to other places. We want to be able to show that, let's see, wrong button, that this access is here to Superior Plaza. So in other words, we have all these main accesses on here, and this one is important enough, I think, to show on the map.
Yes, absolutely.
The back portions are these blocks in here, which would be, this would be Block 3, which is the top one here, Block 4, which is over here. The upper portions of these blocks here, the northern portions of them, we think they need to be identified as flex space. Because right now, I think what we're looking at here is residential. So we need to get a little bit more of a mix in, I would say, in this is the garage. So it's the northern part of these blocks plus these blocks here. So it'd be Block 3, Block 4, Block 5, Block 6, and Block 7. Try to get a little bit more mixture in there. The other one that we talked about were these areas, I always push the wrong button. These areas along in here, 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 and here. Now that, we think there's probably something for the developer to think about extending this, the retail. There's flex space, to add that the darker areas are where the retail is, but there's also, they create a flex area in here that the retail can be expanded here. That gets to, I think, what Trustee Williams was talking about in terms of offering more opportunity for retail expansion. In other words, there's a real intent to create retail along Main Street to the maximum extent possible. So these areas along here, 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 and there. Okay.
What is that designated now?
Well, it's designated as, and unfortunately, it's the map I have is basically is residential. It's the lighter gray. So we were talking about the northern half of these blocks and these up here to be flex space, not residential. And although it could have some residential in it, it just gives you more opportunity. And then here, we're looking at, having the indication that it also includes retail or flex space. So that gives a little bit more growth to the retail area, at least in terms of diagram form and intent.
I agree. Long-term, the vision would be that Main Street would be a commercials, retail street.
And this,
yes, you're right.
This key has a lot of residential in here. There's nothing wrong with that as being part of it, but it needs to be flexed out.
Mm-hmm. At least the first floor, I would imagine.
So your recommendation is to be retail and not flex space?
No, it's what's indicated here
Right.
is flex space. This red, this guy here is the one in the middle. It's retail with flex space above. That's what this is here.
Okay.
We're suggesting that it be extended in these areas here.
Just to be extended to include
Yeah.
flex space?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah,
Not
but
not
that-
exclusively retail, but flex
Correct.
space, so there's an option, I agree.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is
that would be-
staff recommendation? Or whose recommendation is this?
So the color, just to be clear, would it be the crosshatch, which would be retail with flex above, or it'd be blue, which would be flex space, office, residential, live, work?
Well, the areas along here, here, and here would be retail with flex space above.
So my only
And then
thoughts,
we have flex space in these upper northern portions here.
so I totally agree with the concept. The question is whether or not, when those buildings are built, whether or not they'd be viable for retail right off the bat.
They may not.
Yeah.
So,
They may not, but the intent is there, and it depends on how we then look at that FUP, okay? And let's say we're doing this block here, or about half a block, or whatever. Right now, the intent is definitely to have it along this street here, okay? And the intent would also be to have it along here, but at that time, we would be looking at what is the market demand and whether or not we, try to really get the developer to put retail on that bottom floor when there's no market. But if there is, and this is one of the first blocks going, then maybe that's not such a bad idea.
yeah.
But there's that flexibility between being able to do that or not.
Right, so whether or not it works out right off the bat, who knows, but 20 years from now, the vision would be that the first floor would be, at least the first floor would be commercial/retail
Well, I
along
think
Main
I think
Street.
it would, yeah, it just gives you that opportunity to at least grow into it from the PD from what the intent is on this PD.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to be clear on that. So your recommendation is that it could actually be residential at first, but then if we found that we could actually expand retail, we would have that option at some point in the future? Because I'm not real keen on saying that that has to be designated as commercial or retail.
No, I'm not either.
Okay.
That's not what we're suggesting.
All right.
That there's that flexibility between that. But this one is showing, this is showing a real intent, and the idea is to extend that here in the same way.
Right, because otherwise it's listed as residential only.
That's what I have.
We should just clarify exactly what, to me, when I read this, and tell me if I'm wrong, that retail with flex above means it's retail on the first floor.
Right.
Flex above. Well, I'm hearing that we actually want to have a flex on the first floor and flex above.
That's what I'm
So
saying.
it'll probably have to be modified somewhat. Right. Just to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, so maybe there's a different designation.
I actually need the benefit of developers' practical experience. My intuition would be that once something is developed to residential, it's gonna, how, especially if it's purchased, if somebody owns that property and it's residential, is it practically ever going to be changed to retail later on? So my intuition is that you actually have to commit to having retail there and commit to giving it a long enough window to materialize, and then have the flexibility as a board to change that if in fact over some period of time it doesn't materialize. Because to me, in this market, in this location, et cetera, it's going to be pretty easy selling residential. And once it sells, it's sold, it's permanently developed to residential, and doesn't really have a likelihood of ever being repurposed. So my instinct is that you actually do make it the striped retail with flex space above, and some future board might have to change that if that in fact doesn't materialize.
But if you make it striped and you say retail below, it has to be retail below.
Sure, and I think then there's a commitment as a developer commitment and a town commitment to trying to make that retail. Once it goes to residential, I don't ever see it go into anything, but it's privately owned.
But-
It's going to be permanently residential.
Randy said last week, I think I heard it this way, is that they hope to be 65 to 75% committed in the core area, and if they get more commitment going out, then they would put retail and commercial in there. But right now, it's saying that we can't put retail in there, it's saying it has to be residential.
Right.
So why wouldn't we say that it could be either residential or retail, giving him the flexibility that if there is more demand, that he can put it in there? Because right now, it's the way it says that he can't do that now.
What I'm saying, Chris, I just philosophically disagree with you. I'm saying if, in fact, it can be flex, residential or retail, the likelihood is it's going to all develop out to residential, which permanently, in my opinion, negates it ever being retail ever, because it's privately owned, it's going to be a residential apartment or townhome, development, et cetera, et cetera. It's not going to go back to retail.
Right.
So once it builds out to residential, it's residential.
But if we say retail and we can't fill it, it ends up being like...
We can always change that designation. I mean, a future board can change that designation, admitting it's unsuccessful as retail and opening it up for residential. I appreciate what Fred's just put forward, because it really puts a focus on this. Are we going on that major Main Street area for a first-floor retail feel? And I think that is smart at this point in time to go for. And if we find at some later point in time that it's unsuccessful, we can always modify that, in my opinion.
And also, I kind of feel that we're losing that core that we can grow for the retail and the commercial. So as far as what Fred was saying, he's expanding that. And I think that if we put residential, I agree with Trustee Pennington, that it will forever be that. And so we've lost that chance to grow the town center, which is, in my mind, the whole reason why we have this land. That's why this land is here. It's what our whole vision was.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to hear from Randy what his thoughts are on that.
I would just add, that's really all I had to really put forward. Thanks, Fred.
All right, thank you.
Fred, could you, are we going to get a diagram of what it is you're proposing, so it's all nicely diagrammed out for us next Monday, please? That would be nice.
We'll try to.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll do something.
Well, this has been the ongoing discussion of what's the depth of the retail market. It occurs to me that Broomfield probably had this discussion 10 years ago or so when they were putting together the plans for Arista. And it didn't change. When the developer came forward, they built the retail and they have nice posters in the front window, and I think it's less likely that those posters will become viable retail than the successful, thriving market with not enough retail but residential would transition the residential to commercial. You see in thriving urban areas as small as Louisville, as big as Boulder, downtown, Denver, Wash Park, you see residential buildings, the first floor transitions to a commercial use, whether it's a chiropractor, a photographer, a little market. And Louisville has the little market. It's in an old house. I think the candy store, the coffee shop, candy store is also an old house.
But this isn't the type of, to play devil's advocate, that's not the type of building that you're talking here. It's not a little cottage that's being repurposed from a house to a commercial use. This is presumably a big building that is not going to have that same flexibility that a small cottage on
I
Main
actually
Street
think the
might
big
be.
buildings have more flexibility, and our goal is to have Main Street full and active and warm, not have any empty space, and not have unbuilt blocks for years and years and years. You know, there's just so many places that you can go. There's so many examples of where you try to push too much retail and you just never get there. There's a lot of examples of places where you had just enough retail or a little less than just enough, and all the retail was full and it was thriving. And you know, our hope is that you know, we're in a position collectively where we have a town square and a community that is under retail, where people say, gosh, we wish there was more. You know, that means we have a whole bunch of businesses there that are thriving. I think also just the square footage, the concept of square footage gets lost. And, you know, Trustee Pennington was commenting on how she couldn't, you know, appreciate the size of that town square at 1.2 acres. 80,000 feet of retail when you're focusing on sole proprietorships, on small restaurants and boutique shops. Your average small restaurant boutique shop's 2,200 square feet. So, yeah, you'll have a large restaurant, some two-story restaurants, particularly overlooking the fields. We think we can get a 4,000-foot restaurant. But 80,000 feet is a lot of space. And
So just to continue to play devil's advocate, so say that the market demand got to the point that people would want to repurpose the first floor, how would, of the residential buildings, how would that occur then?
well,
Would they be rental properties on the first floor that the lease would expire and then you would move them out?
Well, both Main Street and Avenue B are our pedestrian corridors. And those buildings would be designed to have that strong orientation to the street. That same orientation allows someone to live there have it as their residence or as their business. On Avenue B, we would expect more steps, which makes retail less likely, but not impossible. On Main Street, there would be no steps. And our goal is to build for sale housing, not for rent housing. And the for sale housing is a lot easier to repurpose. If somebody owns it, and a owner says, okay, if I don't live here, I could rent it for $1,200, $1,500 a month. And they say, but I could rent it to somebody as a business for $3,000 a month. And then you have the internal walls in those buildings, you would move your internal walls. And
But your neighbors next door, wouldn't they put up a fuss if that wasn't clearly identified somehow that the next door down from me I don't want them to be a shop. So you know what I mean?
We disclose it right up front.
Okay,
It's
so it'd be part of the
People know
disclosure.
they're moving into a Main Street. There's all different, it's not a mainstream big market segment, but there's pioneers, there's people that want different types of living environments. But the goal is to have it active and warm. You can go over, I forget the name of the street where Christie's is.
Over across the way.
Right here in
Benihana.
Yeah, where Benihana is. Same thing. They envision.
The tumbleweeds over there, that one?
Yeah, and same thing. Posters in the
Right.
windows. They envisioned a sort of Main Street environment.
We have zero interest in that, but, so what you're saying is, though, that it would be recorded on the PD that, I'm not sure, I'm looking at the town's lawyer now, how that would be disclosed to them. That would be part of recorded on the PD that...
Sorry, I was looking at one thing on the internet.
So, What was said is that there would be disclosure that in these residential areas along Main Street, that it would be disclosed to them that potentially the first floor would, yeah, you have a house there right now, but you might have a business next door to you. Would that have to be recorded someplace?
Well, it basically would be recorded in the PUD. The PUD are going to approve the zoning and have the different options, and people buy the property subject to the zoning that's allowed. And I'm not sure it'd have to be an actual specific disclosure on a seller statement, but it would, anybody who buys any property in his own district, they're presumed to know what the zoning allows and what it doesn't allow.
Okay, but so in the diagrams here, though, it's just residential, but you're saying is that that would be recorded on the PD?
Right.
Is that what you're
Well, and
saying?
I think what we're talking about, staff helped us in just, part of this has been a learning process for us, understanding how we needed to, what our application needed to look like. And we had thought of all the land as having PD zoning, and so we used the land use concept exhibit, the figure A. We used this exhibit to show what we really think, based on our crystal ball today, the way things will look. We thought that there was, that most of the property had flexible zoning, and with a few exceptions that were designated office. So what we're taking away and what we've learned is that that's really not the case. In this land use concept, it's going to be really the land use plan, and that, as your staff suggested, we would change those areas identified by Fred from the residential category to the flex space category, which is office, residential, live, work, and we'd be able to accommodate our need if.
Okay, that's fair enough. Once again, I don't want 10 years from now, because this is going to be so fantastic, it's going to be built out in 5, and that you come back, somebody comes back to my future colleagues on the board and said, nobody ever told me that this could be a business next door to me. We want to have some way to record that, yeah, it's always been in there, it's been recorded. I'm not sure what your real estate agent told you, but it's documented someplace that that's flexible.
Right, and if that is changed, as we're discussing, this is going to be recorded. Like anybody who buys property in his own district, they're supposed to know the different uses that are allowed.
All right.
And hopefully their agent will explain to them what the options are when they actually.
Well, I've sat at a whole bunch of meetings here at this dais where people said, well, my real estate agent said that was going to be 100% open space forever, and nobody ever told me anything was going to be built there. I don't want a future board to have that conversation. Trustee Pennington?
I would like to see Fred's plan presented to us on a diagram next week. I would also, Randy, I'm trying to visualize what it is you're putting forth by asking for just a basic flex space zoning. You enter our Main Street, our key corridor here, and I'm not sure how the buildings are going to be sold or how the properties are going to be sold, but I might have, like I said, I just came back from San Francisco, so I saw all the, whatever they're called, brownstones or, typical San Francisco. So
row home, brownstone.
Row home.
Yeah, the Boston.
So I may see, 4 row homes as I'm entering Main Street, and then I may see a business. I'm looking at ground floor. Let's say I'm walking there, so row home, pink row home, yellow row home, green row home, business. Row home, business, business. Row home, business. I'm having difficulty getting my arms around how this is going to look and feel as if it were well planned and well thought out, rather than a hodgepodge mishmash. So I'm going to ask you to flesh out for us how that would look, because I'm sort of wanting some sense of order to my main street.
Well, so what we're identifying is about 250 feet, 250 to 300 feet. You're not going to get that many buildings in that 250 to 300
Yeah,
feet.
so, yeah, that's why I need
This
you
building's probably
to put the flesh on the bones here.
50 feet wide.
To me, I'm seeing some uniformity on the lower level, and then what happens above that is, maybe we'll have a floor of commercial, then maybe 2 floors of residential, whereas on the other building, maybe we have 3 floors of residential and no commercial above that ground street level. So, to me, it's got to be fleshed out.
And is that something that we could accomplish with the architectural, with the architectural imagery and the architectural guidelines?
How's it going to work?
We're not proposing any buildings right now.
You can do it as quick and dirty as you want, but I'm just having difficulty.
I think the building precedence and this, street precedence is probably going to be helpful.
Okay. Hopefully we'll be able to pull that together by Monday. I'd like to get your feedback on that.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Anything else from the board? Anything else from staff? Anything from the applicant that you have questions about that you want clarity or?
I think I got your feedback on the exhibits. If there's any more feedback, Trustee Williams had commented. I appreciate, I've taken note of all of your comments.
And you know what? I think it would be best if I start out at 7 and not 10:30. Because clearly, I cannot last this long. I just can't do it. So I'm happy to give all my feedback at 7, but at this point, forget it.
Okay, so next steps then?
Well, sounds like you want to continue this to the July 8th meeting. I've got some other items that we'll need to take care of on the 8th.
Yeah.
I was planning on doing those first, because they're at
Sounds
the
good.
board, and then we can move on to the council.
I'm not anticipating, unless I'm not getting the right read here, a whole bunch of additional comments at that time, but we just need to have the things that we've asked for to come back to review.
Just as a point of order, for the last 2 meetings, we have, I don't know, if not allowed is the correct designation, but we've had no...
Public comment is coming back around.
Okay, good, because we've not heard anybody's opinion on anything we've discussed.
Right, and so how that, what I'm envisioning is that when we get the near end product of whatever that is, there'll be public comment at that time. But I think right now it's going to be a little hard because
Okay.
so many things have changed. So it would probably be best to have a more close to the end document. That would be my perspective. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to the date certain, with that date being July the 8th at 7:00.
So moved.
By Trustee Skumatz, second by Trustee Hickson. Discussion, all in favor, unanimous. Anything else to come before the board this evening? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I show you my cool little toy?